Early summer, Silver City, a city of shadows. The air hung thick, heavy with the promise of a sweltering summer. But here, in the back alley of the opulent Lynn estate, a different kind of heat pulsed, a desperate, frantic energy. "Miss, you must go. Hurry." Ming, his face etched with worry, supported the pregnant woman as they stumbled from the estate's back door. He glanced back, fear a constant companion. Lynn Banksia, heavy with child, was still recovering from a near-death experience. She'd been asleep in her room when a firepot had been snuck in, the doors and windows sealed shut. The airless room had nearly suffocated her. Now, her head spun, her stomach churned, the after-effects of her near demise and the chilling betrayal she'd suffered at the hands of her own father and stepmother. "Miss, get to your grandparents' house, and don't you ever come back here. You must tell them. Your father is not to be trusted." Ming's voice was rough with anger and pain. Their pace quickened as he added with a grim urgency, "Your mother. Her death might not have been an accident. He might have had a hand in it." The revelation struck Lynn Banksia like a blow, stealing the color from her face. She was reeling, struggling to process the double betrayal. "Careful now," Ming urged, his grip firm as he steered her through the maze of shadows and rough paths. She moved like a ghost, her thoughts swirling with his terrifying words. They reached a waiting taxi, its engine idling impatiently. Ming practically shoved her inside. "My brother will get you safe," Ming said to the driver, his voice thick with emotion. "Take care of her for me. She is the only one I have left." The driver nodded, a solemn understanding in his eyes. He was Ming's brother and the one person Ming trusted most. The instant the driver pressed on the accelerator. "There! Stop them! Don't let her escape!" Lynn Banksia pressed herself to the car window, her heart slamming against her ribs. A horde of men, eyes wild and faces twisted with fury, charged towards them, brandishing clubs like weapons. Lynn Banksia's head, still swimming from the smoke, cleared instantly. Her blood ran cold as a wave of terror washed over her. "You're dead for letting her get away," a man bellowed. They swarmed Ming, a whirlwind of brutal strikes. He fell to the ground, a broken figure before their violence. "Ming, no!" Lynn Banksia hammered at the window, screaming at the top of her lungs, her fury as potent as her despair. More men swarmed the taxi, their faces contorted in hate. "Stop the car!" they screamed, their clubs swinging menacingly. The driver, ignoring his own fear and his brother's cries, slammed his foot on the gas. "Ming! Ming!" she cried, her voice breaking, desperate to save him. She forgot her own plight completely. Through the dust-filled air, she could see Ming sprawled on the ground, his face a bloody mess. Despite the beating, he managed a smile, a desperate, unwavering signal to keep going. Lynn Banksia's heart felt like it was breaking, each heartbeat a stab of pain. She understood. Ming was repaying an old debt to her grandfather. The driver glanced at his brother through the rear-view mirror, his eyes glazed with unshed tears. He gritted his teeth, his hand gripping the wheel with white knuckles as he pushed the pedal to the floor. Saving Ming was no longer an option. Their odds were hopeless. But there was still a more crucial task at hand: to get the young lady to safety, to honor his brother's desperate plea. The taxi pulled away, shaking off their pursuers. They raced forward, an escape from a nightmare. Lynn Banksia's tears fell, her heart heavy as Ming's words echoed in her mind. "Miss, go to your grandparents and do not ever return here. Tell them that your father cannot be trusted." Suddenly, a blinding light flooded the car. She raised her hand, her eyes narrowing before she turned, and saw the familiar estate engulfed in flames, a terrifying spectacle that made her scream inside. "Ah, no!" Screams erupted from inside the blaze, cries that sounded as if they were coming from hell itself. She saw servants running out of the building, their bodies ablaze. They stumbled and fell, their agonizing cries abruptly silenced as they were consumed by the fire. Lynn Banksia's pupils dilated, a look of absolute terror and disbelief on her face. Her grandparents, their wrinkled faces and warm, Loving smiles flickered in her mind. "Grandfather! Grandmother!" she cried out, forcing herself out of her shock. She threw herself at the door, screaming to get out of the vehicle. Her reaction was much more intense now, like a creature caught in a death trap. But the driver, ever aware of the danger, had locked all the doors. No matter how hard she tried, the door wouldn't budge. "Let me out! I need to get out of here!" she yelled, her voice frantic and full of panic. The driver knew that they had no time to lose. He slammed down on the accelerator, driving faster and faster, putting as much distance between them and the burning estate. "Grandfather, grandmother." Lynn Banksia twisted in her seat, beating on the window, screaming herself hoarse. Tears streamed down her face. "Grandmother." The flames bellowed upwards, a terrifying inferno reaching into the sky, like some enraged demon set free. Her throat was raw from screaming. Her face was a mask of tears. "Stop the car. Please stop. My grandparents are inside. I need to save them." "Miss Lynn, you're not a god. Going back there is suicide. There are people after us. Do you want to take your baby into that fire?" He shouted back, hoping that she would finally come to her senses. "There may be other traps. Your father is too far gone to spare you." Lynn Banksia froze, her face deathly pale, fighting back her inner collapse. Her father's smiling face, a mask of deception, rose in her mind. The car sped up even more. He had to finish his mission. He could not let his brother's sacrifice be in vain. The intense heat surged past the car, the fire warping the house, splitting brick and stone. A deafening explosion shook the air. Lynn Banksia witnessed the raging flames rising to the sky. It was an all-consuming inferno. Everything was falling apart. The force of the explosion almost flipped the car. Had they stayed another 10 seconds, none of them would have survived. A bone-deep horror and grief wrapped around Lynn Banksia, her soul feeling like it had been blown apart. She looked pale and lost, her eyes wide with terror. All that was left of her was a shaking, weeping shell of her former self. Her hair disheveled, her eyes blank as she stared back at the destruction. "No!" she whispered, her mind unable to comprehend what was happening. Her hands curled into fists, hatred rising up inside her. Her father, who had married into the family, and her stepmother. Not only were they trying to kill her and her child, but they had also murdered her grandparents in the most appalling way imaginable. They were monsters, not human beings. The immensity of what had happened left Lynn Banksia unable to cope. Her body was trembling. She could feel the first waves of labor pains growing more and more intense. 6 years later, Silver City, a city of secrets. Sunday, the prestigious U Bamboo Villas, a sprawling estate of 1,000 acres, was home to Zhang Jingting, Silver City's most powerful man, a man of myth. He was young, head of the Junshin Group, a shining star in the business world. He was a legend. He wasn't at the office today. After lunch, he was relaxing in a wicker chair on his second-floor terrace, resting. Dressed in white loungewear, bathed in the warmth of the sun, he drifted into sleep. His handsome face was slightly troubled, a mix of grace and a dark intensity. He dreamt of a hotel room, a party 7 years ago where he had been the victim of a cruel trick. He had unknowingly drunk a spiked drink. In the hazy light, a girl, she couldn't have been older than 20, appeared before him. She had soft features and an ethereal kind of beauty. In her moment of shock, he understood that he had entered the wrong room. The drug pulsed through his system. He forced himself on the girl, their bodies entwined in a passionate encounter that would leave them both changed forever. He was lost in the moment. He was not himself. There was nothing she could do to stop him. A gentle breeze swept across his brow and pulled him from his dream. A glass of warm milk sat before him. He paused, returning to reality. Following the arm that held the milk, he saw Butler Shin standing over him. "Young Master Zhan, your milk." Zhan Jingting took the glass, sipping slowly as his eyes wandered to the garden. "Any news on her?" "Nothing yet." He sighed softly. "Keep looking for her." "Yes, sir." He was tormented by the feelings of regret and guilt. He, a man not given to such feelings, was obsessed with the memories of that night and the intoxicating scent of herbs that had clung to her skin. The butler gone, a ringtone cut through the silence. He glanced at his phone, his grandfather's name displayed on the screen. Zhang Jingting collected his thoughts and swiped to answer. Hello, grandfather. Another month has passed. And have you found a girlfriend yet? The old man demanded, his patience clearly wearing thin. He delivered an ultimatum. If you can't find one yourself, when Xinxue returns, it will be an arranged marriage. This is an important part of life. It's time to get serious. You need to start a family first, then build your career. It's tradition. Another lecture about marriage. Zhang Jingting brushed it off as usual, offering a few vague reassurances. Before he hung up, his grandfather added, Oh, by the way, the Shu and Lin families are having a wedding in a few days. You'll have to attend for me. I won't be able to make it back. Shu family? Lin family? Who are these people? Zhang Jingting had never even heard of them. The old man said, The time and place are in a message I sent to your WeChat. He didn't ask more questions. He knew he had to carry out his grandfather's tasks. In Silver City, only the Zhang, Jun, Ji, and Jiang families were considered the major families that Zhang Jingting was familiar with, financial titans of their time. The others were nothing more than insignificant players. In tranquil and beautiful Victoria, Canada, on the second floor of a villa, Lin Banxia stood at the window, a French dress draped around her, her pretty face unreadable. She had just stumbled upon some news. Yang Yiming, the head of the Lin family in Silver City, was desperately seeking medical care for his loyal, gravely ill housekeeper, Uncle Ming. This act of compassion had been praised by many. A photo of Uncle Ming was released, showing him in a wheelchair. Though he was well-dressed, he was painfully thin. Lin Banxia stared at the picture, her memory flashing back to 6 years ago when Ming had helped her flee the Lin estate, only to be beaten and left for dead, bleeding and broken. Now, they claimed his injuries were the result of a serious illness? Who would believe that? But Ming was still alive. This news brought Lin Banxia a surge of relief. For 6 long years, Yang Yiming had been ambitious, yet he had not dared change the Lin name to Yang. He had even managed to cultivate a reputation as a devoted son, with many believing he was a good man. Banxia, and you, knowing she couldn't keep it from her any longer, came to stand beside her. Actually, the news came out here half a month ago. Lin Banxia blinked away, the tears forming in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked, her tone without blame. And you remained silent. She had been worried. Lin Banxia made a decision. I'm going back to Silver City. It's time for them to pay in blood. Mommy! The door swung open. 2 adorable little balls of energy burst into the room. What did Mommy say? Are we going home? The children were excited. Mommy! Does going home mean we get to see our daddy? At the sight of her children, Lin Banxia's face instantly lit up with a smile. She crouched down, pulling them into her arms. Sweethearts, there are monsters in Silver City. Mommy has to go fight them first, and then I'll come get you. Won't Mommy take us with her? One of them was visibly deflated. The other frowned. But Mommy, listen to me. Lin Banxia's voice was stern, and the children immediately fell silent. She didn't have time to waste. She needed to go back to Silver City right away and get Ming out of there. And you understood. Leaving the children behind was a way to protect them. After all, she had almost died with them 6 years ago. As Lin Banxia packed her bags, preparing to leave, and you gave her a warning. Banxia, the news about the search for a doctor for the housekeeper has spread across the world. That was a lot of money for advertising. So Yang Yiming is willing to do anything to lure me back. This time, I will make sure he gets what he wishes for. Lin Banxia had never forgotten the events of that fateful night 6 years ago. Soon, a plane took off from Victoria International Airport, bound for Silver City International Airport. 6 years had transformed this woman. She was like a phoenix rising from the ashes. A dozen hours later, under the clear sky of Silver City International Airport, a flight landed. Lin Banxia descended the plane steps, her feet touching Silver City's soil again. The familiar breeze swept over her, and she raised her head to look at the sky, a sharp pain piercing her heart. She arrived at the site of her grandparents' former home. Gone was the vibrant life it once held. Gone were the sounds of joy and laughter. All that remained was the charred remains of the building from 6 years ago. The devastation was intertwined with her memory of the inferno, twisting her heart. The painful memories came flooding back. She dropped to her knees, bowing her head low as she kowtowed 3 times. Grandfather, grandmother, I am so sorry I wasn't able to help you. I will avenge you. Her vision blurred with tears, her heart full of hatred for her helplessness on that terrible day. That day, she also discovered some unexpected news. The Lin and Shu families were joining together in marriage. The Shu family's only son was set to marry the Lin family's only daughter, Lin Yao, in 2 days. Seeing the words, only daughter, Lin Banksia smiled. That's interesting. I guess I need to prepare myself and give them a big surprise. Soon, it was the day of the wedding, and Silver City's old cathedral was teeming with people. The marriage of the Shu and Lin families was a grand affair, with many media outlets covering the event. The wedding cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and was being live-streamed. The church parking lot was filled with luxury cars, and guests were arriving one after the other. A limited edition Lamborghini was particularly eye-catching. The arrival of Zhang Jingting, CEO of the Junshin Group, caused a frenzy among the crowd. He was stealing the spotlight away from the happy couple. Wow, it's young Master Zhang. Am I seeing things? It's really him. Why would young Master Zhang show up at a place like this? Someone wondered. The Zhang family is top tier. The Shu and Lin families aren't in the same league. He is so handsome, even more than in the newspapers. Someone piped up, I heard, young Master Zhang's grandfather and the Shu grandfather know each other, so young Master Zhang is attending on behalf of his grandfather. There's likely no business connection between the families. Zhang Jingting was clad in a bespoke black suit. He looked calm and regal, setting him apart from everyone else. Even standing quietly in a corner, he was the most striking person in the crowd. Many of the women were secretly snapping pictures of him. As the wedding march began, Lin Yao, draped in a custom-made white dress and veil, walked towards the handsome man in a white suit, arm in arm with her father, Yang Yiming. Hiding behind the facade of being the Lin family's son-in-law, Yang Yiming was still well-regarded and respected, with an impeccable reputation. The entire Lin group was now under his control. Lin Yao was willing to marry Shu Qingyun because she wanted to use the Shu family's power to solidify her position as the eldest daughter of the Lin family, a position she had stolen. The wedding march played, joyous for some, somber for others. Some felt unease. Just as the ceremony was about to end, as the priest prepared to announce the exchange of vows, the church's doors were thrown open. Wait a minute! Everyone turned, their eyes widening as a girl in a flowing red gown, elegant and self-assured, like an angel descended from heaven. She walked inside with measured steps, high heels clicking on the stone floor. A Lin family daughter is getting married, but no one bothered to tell me, the real Lin family daughter? Her voice was so familiar, her tone so casual. When Yang Yiming and his wife saw her face, their chests tightened and their faces turned ashen. Lin Banksia? The girl's eyes drifted over Lin Yao, who was dressed in white. Who are you? Some sort of imposter? The bride threw back her veil, her face twisting with a mixture of anger and awe at the beauty of the woman before her. Along with the other guests, Zhang Jingting was equally stunned. He thought he was just attending a wedding to please his grandfather, but it seems he might be in for some real drama. Zhang Jingting's gaze rested on the girl in the red dress. Her features were exquisite, her skin pale and luminous, and her entire being exuded a regal grace that spoke of someone who had returned to claim their rightful place. The media, always eager for a good story, began snapping pictures, capturing the guilt and panic that were playing on Yang Yiming and his wife's faces. The guests began to whisper, and Yang Yiming's face grew dark. Lin Banksia, her stepmother, Xieyueru, launched a preemptive strike. How dare you show your face here? You got knocked up by some bum living under a bridge, and then you ran off with him. Nobody could stop you. A buzz rippled through the crowd. The guests began murmuring amongst themselves. She was pregnant a few years ago, wasn't she? Her child should be 5 or 6 years old by now. The father's identity was a mystery, but a bum. That stepmother has really tried hard to maintain the Lin family's reputation, someone murmured. The words landed on Zhang Jingting's ears, his expression hidden, hands in his pockets, his deep gaze focused on Lin Bangxia. Stepmother, that's not how it is. Lin Bangxia retorted. My genius kids inherited only the best genes. You come here and slander me, and you might have some issues with their father. Lin Bangxia pointed at the bride and continued. Is that girl your daughter? What's her relationship with my father? Could she be the result of an affair he had while married to my mother? Her question ended in a cynical laugh. How dare she take the Lin name? My mother was the only one in the family who was a Lin. The cameras clicked. The media wouldn't miss such a sensational story. Yang Yiming's face turned a shade of iron gray. Lin Bangxia, he said, his voice barely controlled. I'm happy for you to attend, but if you're here to cause trouble, don't blame me for taking action. She was obviously there to sabotage the wedding. What happy celebration was he talking about? Action? What kind of action? The red-dressed girl's voice rose. You gonna burn me alive? Like you did with my grandparents? A collective gasp went through the crowd. Don't you accuse me of something so horrible? Yang Yiming roared, his face contorted in anger before the media. Everything should be backed by evidence. I bear the responsibility for your upbringing. But if you slander me, I'll sue you. Then I'll see you in court. 6 years. That's more than enough time for me to collect proof. Lin Bangxia's determined gaze held a power that was undeniable. She then raised her hand. 7 or 8 men burst through the doors. They began to destroy the wedding hall in a rampage. The guests screamed, scattering to find cover. Lin Bangxia's eyes narrowed, and she turned to leave. Xie Yueru quickly shielded her frightened daughter. Yang Yiming, seething with rage, pointed at the door. Close the doors. Don't let her get away. Today I'll show her what true family discipline is. Her objective achieved, surrounded by the sound of crashing furniture and broken glass. Lin Bangxia didn't bother to argue with him. She saw that the main doors were closed and turned towards the back doors, weaving her way through the chaotic crowd. Zhang Jingting, hands still in his pockets, frowned in annoyance. He turned towards the back doors too. This was a waste of time and bad luck. How could his grandfather have an association with a family like this? Even at a wedding, there was some security. Quick, grab that unfilial daughter. Yang Yiming shouted as he ran down from the stage, glaring at Lin Bangxia's retreating back. Sai Wei, Zhang, go. Don't let Lin Bangxia escape. Xie Yueru yelled. This time, they would eliminate her for good. Lin Bangxia, in her high heels, was moving surprisingly fast. The church's back door was within sight. A couple of Yang Yiming's men lunged for her, their hands reaching for her shoulders. She grabbed their wrists and threw them back with such force that they nearly crashed into Zhang Jingting. The man paused, his cold, dark gaze locking on Lin Bangxia. Lin Bangxia's eyes met his for 2 seconds. In the chaos, she kept moving. Grab her! She is Lin Bangxia. Xie Yueru shrieked, and Sai Wei and Sai Hu charged towards the back door. Lin Bangxia had already made it out the door. Hearing the heavy footsteps closing in on her, she glanced back. She recognized those chasing her. 6 years ago, those were the same thugs who had beaten Uncle Ming. And now they looked set on killing her too. After just a few blows, she realized they were strong. She would like to take her revenge on them right now, but she knew that Xie Yueru would have planned for her appearance, and that there would be more men on their way. If she continued to fight, she would be outnumbered. Lin Bangxia dodged a punch, barely avoiding getting her face damaged. Using her foot to brace herself, she grabbed the side of a Lamborghini. Sai Wei and Sai Hu froze. Lin Bangxia turned her gaze and saw Zhang Jingting preparing to get into his car. The man stared at her, his deep eyes like ancient galaxies, revealing no emotions whatsoever. The instant their eyes met, Lin Bangxia felt an overwhelming sense of coldness. The thug stopped just a few feet away, unsure what to do. After all, that was young Master Zhang. A dozen of Yang Yiming's men poured out of the back door. All of them stopped when they saw Zhang Jingting. Everyone was afraid. A few journalists also came outside, snapping pictures of the scene. Jean Jingting glanced at the woman, then at the group of men. His time was precious. He bent to get into his car. He had no intention of getting involved in all of this. Before his assistant closed the car door, Lynn Banksia slipped inside, landing in his lap. "Mister, do me a favor and get me out of here. I'll pay you anything." With that, she slammed the door shut. A faint, familiar scent of herbs drifted towards him, stopping Jean Jingting for a second. Outside the car, his assistant and driver, Mu Bo, was stunned. But seeing that nothing was happening inside and that the scene outside was turning into chaos, he jumped into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove away, leaving the others speechless. In the departing Lamborghini, Lynn Banksia scrambled from the man's lap and sat beside him. "I'm sorry about that. Just drop me off anywhere." Jean Jingting had no interest in the Lin family's affairs. What followed was a 60-second silence. Lynn Banksia focused on the man's profile. His aloof, detached eyes were deep and dark. This godlike man looked dangerous. "Don't be angry, or actually it's okay if you are angry. You helped me today. What do you want for it? How much money?" Lynn Banksia pulled out her phone. "Should I scan you? Just give me your payment QR code. I don't like being in debt to others." "Stop the car." Jean Jingting's tone suddenly turned cold. Mu Bo slammed on the brakes and pulled the Lamborghini to the side of the road. Lynn Banksia turned towards him. Before she could speak again, Jean Jingting turned, his eyes burning with cold. "Get out!" The girl started, opening the car door. "Fine. You're the one who doesn't want any money for it. Don't come looking for me later. I don't wait for people forever." After getting out of the car, she closed the door, and the car sped away. Today, the news was going to be crazy. The Lin and Shu marriage was a disaster. The true Lin family heiress had appeared, and the wedding that had cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars had been destroyed. The return of Lynn Banksia, who was said to have run off with a bum under a bridge and then mysteriously vanished, was now all over the news. According to the wedding videos, she was at war with her father and stepmother. But the fact that Lynn Banksia had gotten into young Master Jean's car at the last minute took over the headlines. "Oh my God, our young Master Jean never goes near women. What's the deal with Lynn Banksia and young Master Jean? Why would he let her into his car?" That Lynn Banksia is too much of a social climber. From a bum under a bridge to young Master Jean. That's quite a leap. Jean Jingting arrived home, took a shower, and picked up the clothes that the woman had brushed against. He sniffed them, but there was no smell. Could that faint scent of herbs have been an illusion? 3 days later, at the Lin family villa, in the grand living room, several subordinates hung their heads. Xie Yueru slammed her hand on the table. "Have you found any trace of her?" "Madam, Miss Lin has vanished into thin air," a subordinate replied, trembling. "Vanished into thin air, my ass." Xie Yueru exploded. "You said she vanished 6 years ago? And what happened? She just appeared, didn't she?" Not only had Lin Banksia ruined the wedding, but on that same day, Uncle Ming, who had been tortured for 4 years, had disappeared as well, and the safe in the house had been broken open. It wasn't just the cash that was taken, but also a few company seals. They had called the police, but the security cameras were damaged. The perpetrator had clearly come prepared. For 3 nights, Yang Yiming and Xie Yuru couldn't sleep, plagued by nightmares of Lin Banksia coming to seek revenge with a knife. Security at the villa had been heightened. "I'm worried about the connection between that girl and young Master Jean," Yang Yiming said. He had seen the news and now felt no guilt towards his daughter. His only concern was protecting his own interests. Lin Banksia's words at the wedding came back to haunt him. "Then I'll see you in court. 6 years. That's more than enough time for me to collect proof." The girl was clearly a ticking time bomb and needed to be eliminated as soon as possible if he wanted to have any peace. These past few days, Yang Yiming was afraid to go out because reporters would swarm him everywhere he went. Thousands of questions about the Lin family were hurled at him. At the wedding, Lin Banksia had exposed all his lies, and online, public opinion was turning against him. He couldn't handle the barrage of sharp questions and had decided to lock himself in the house, waiting for the storm to pass. Sieyueru, just like him, was like a cat on a hot tin roof. Several company seals were gone. She could only pace back and forth anxiously. Ming was under 24-hour surveillance, hidden away. How did Lin Banksia manage to take him? Who else but Lin Banksia could have taken him? Even without security footage, they were certain it was her. The Junshin Group, a landmark in Silver City, was a tower of glass and steel, representing the dreams of countless young people. In the minimalist but luxurious CEO's office, Mu Bo, dressed in a black suit, entered carrying a folder. President, here's the detailed information on Lin Banksia. Zhang Jingting paused his work and quickly reached for the folder. Detailed indeed, it was so thick. Yes, because for a brief moment, he had caught a faint, lingering scent of herbs from the woman, a smell he remembered from his past. And then, as fate would have it, he had been having that same dream about their encounter in the hotel for the past few nights. So, Zhang Jingting had investigated Lin Banksia. The Su Lin mansion, located in a peaceful area, had a courtyard filled with flowers. This was a property that her grandfather had given her on her 18th birthday. She had never lived there, but someone had always taken care of it. Banksia, and you said bringing in a bowl of herbal medicine. The air was thick with a bitter smell. Lin Banksia took the bowl. You should get some rest too. You've been working so hard recently. And you smiled. It's nothing. Then she turned and went upstairs. The girl, holding the bowl of medicine, gently pushed open a door. The setting sun streamed through the window, illuminating the middle-aged man in a wheelchair. He was well-dressed, but painfully thin and frail. Seeing Uncle Ming again, Lin Banksia's breathing hitched slightly. She lowered her head, fighting back tears as a smile spread across her lips. She sat down on a chair in front of the wheelchair and took the middle-aged man's hand in hers. Uncle Ming. Her voice broke. It had been just 6 years, but he had been so broken that he was unrecognizable. His face had more wrinkles, his eyes were lifeless, and his body shook slightly. Uncle Ming, don't be scared, it's me, the girl said softly, forcing back the pain. It's Banksia. Do you remember me? The man in the wheelchair tilted his head, oblivious to her words. The finger she held still trembled violently, perhaps terrified from being abused, and was tense at the sight of anyone. Lin Banksia released his hand, wiping the corner of her eyes, and then patiently began to feed him the medicine, spoonful by spoonful. The memories of 6 years ago flooded her mind, and the tears welled up in her eyes again. Her and her children's lives were owed to Ming. She would never forget that. She vowed she would heal him, and then she would make those people pay in blood. After feeding Ming his medicine, Lin Banksia gently wiped his lips with a handkerchief and instructed the servants to help him to his bed. As soon as she got to the living room, her phone rang. It was a call from Canada, and she picked up, hearing an urgent voice on the other end. Boss, it's bad. The young masters have disappeared. Hearing this news, Lin Banksia only slightly frowned. Compared to the other person's anxiety, she seemed rather calm. Okay, I understand. After ending the call, a hint of worry flashed in her dark eyes. She knew her sons too well. Their IQs were extremely high. It was very difficult for anyone to fool them. But now wasn't the best time for them to return to the country, especially since the war with Yang Yiming had begun. Footsteps approached. Lin Banksia turned around to see Yu entering with her phone in her hand. Banksia, I just got a call. And Emomo left a note and have run away. Don't even bother trying to call their smartwatches. They won't answer. Lin Banksia's face slightly shifted. They are just making trouble. When I catch them, I'll punish them properly. And you said, I've tried calling them, but I haven't been able to contact them. Leave their phone on 24 hours. Wait for them to come to us. Compared to her children's safety, Lin Banksia was more worried that they would try to find their father first. After all, their genetics would mean that their father was also of high intelligence. She just feared that there would be a power imbalance, and the father would want to take her children away from her. There was no emotional connection. Marriage was out of the question. And she was the one who had raised her children. She would not just give them up like that. The night deepened. The Yu Bamboo Villas, a symbol of wealth, was ablaze with lights. In the courtyard, a limited edition Lamborghini was parked. In the second-floor study, Jean Jingting stood with his hands in his pockets, his deep eyes gazing at the night outside. He had finished reading the information on Lin Bangxia and understood the situation with the Lin family. He felt a flicker of emotion, but he was also surprised. Had this Lin heiress actually slept with a bum under a bridge and ran off with him while she was pregnant? And also, how could Yang Yiming be so hypocritical? He was using the Lin family name while trying to partner up with the Junshin Group, again and again. He could not be trusted. His phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. He looked at the caller ID and frowned slightly. The phone continued to ring. He swiped to answer and placed it to his ear. What is it? It was a rule that his assistant wouldn't bother him after work hours unless it was something extremely urgent. President, I just got word that the owner of Shinzone Group has scheduled a meeting with Kelson at the club tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m., Mubo reported. Jean Jingting paused to consider. Mubo continued, Shinzone's strength is nowhere near ours, but I hear they've put in a lot of effort on this project and are planning on giving a 20% cut. The man on the other end analyzed what his assistant had just told him. Mubo laughed a bit dismissively. Still, beating our Junshin Group and winning Kelson's admiration and approval is not just about brute force. Think about it. With their strength, how did they manage to get a meeting with Kelson and move the time to 7:30 a.m.? Jean Jingting asked quietly, cutting right to the chase. Mubo paused for a few seconds. So, they have someone behind them? Then their project proposal should be excellent and could potentially impress Kelson? He immediately grew more alert. Precisely. A man seasoned in the world of business. He had a sharp eye for detail. So we'll be there at 7:30 a.m. as well. Understood, President. After the call, Jean Jingting's eyebrow arched slightly. He had a strange feeling that something would happen tomorrow, and he couldn't tell if it was good or bad. That night, at the Su Lin mansion, the silvery moonlight gently shrouded the estate, making the surroundings even more peaceful. Before she went to sleep, Lin Bangxia couldn't resist trying her son's smartwatches. They were still turned off. As a mother, she was still secretly worried. She hoped they wouldn't fall into Yang Yiming's hands. The next morning, at the Golden Dynasty Private Club, the main building was white and modern, with beautifully landscaped gardens surrounding it. The tranquil environment was perfect for discussing business. A car was already parked in the courtyard. Lu Shinzong, the owner of Shinzong Group, had arrived early and was now sitting confidently in a meeting room, waiting. Brother, are you sure Daddy will be here today? Anan asked, dressed in a little black suit. His small face was full of anticipation. Momo adjusted his sunglasses and swiped across a picture on his tablet. That's right. Look, little brother, that's Daddy's Lamborghini. Isn't it cool? We'll see him soon. So cool. Anan gasped. Then, tilting his head, but how do you know he's Daddy? I checked the information from Ann and you. She said it was him who was with Mommy 7 years ago for 6 hours during the day. Anan began to worry. Brother, if Mommy finds out we secretly came to see Daddy, will she be angry? With such a handsome, rich, and hunky future husband, I'm worried she might pounce on him and make 2 more kids. And Momo joked, and it couldn't help but giggle. Little brother, after this is over, let's get Daddy to take us out in that car and get something yummy. And Momo said proudly. He grabbed Anan's hand and walked towards the club. Have you thought about what you want to eat? Roast duck, chicken wings, and I also want some tea. Anything. Daddy will pay for it all. Our daddy's rich. His brother, Lin Yimo, was a genius hacker. If he wanted any information, he could get it within minutes. His younger brother, Lin Ian, was like his mother and was skilled in medicine. He was also more introverted and gentle. Once inside, the 2 boys glanced through the glass walls. There were a few people discussing something. The 2 little guys squatted down against a wall and opened up their tablets and got to work. Their goal was simple: to infiltrate the other party's system, steal the data, and crash it. Soon, Jean Jingting's limited edition Lamborghini and Kelson's custom Rolls-Royce arrived almost simultaneously in the empty parking lot outside. Lu Shinzong, in the meeting room, saw them both arrive. His heart sank. Why was young Master Jean here so early? Make sure to show your best. Explain our project strengths in a clear and concise manner. He instructed his assistant again. Check if the projection is working. His two assistants nodded, holding their laptops. Don't worry. Kelson, a successful British businessman in his 50s, was meeting with Jean Jingting for the second time, but they didn't know each other well. For this project, Kelson would only work with the company whose proposal was most likely to bring mutual benefits. The two men spoke to each other in English as they walked inside, each with their assistants following behind, giving off an aura of power. In the hallway outside the meeting room, the two children were sitting against a wall, playing on their tablets. They immediately caught the attention of the approaching group. The children were adorable, dressed in perfectly fitted suits. They definitely looked like young, rich heirs. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and the two children glanced up, their eyes meeting Jean Jingting's. It was like a slow-motion scene in a movie, two miniature versions of Jean Jingting, their handsome features a perfect copy of their father's genes. Mu Bo was stunned. If the president weren't single, he would swear these were his kids. The two business tycoons didn't stop. They entered the meeting room with their respective entourages. Inside the room, the three parties exchanged brief greetings and sat down on the sofas. Mr. Kelson, I scheduled this meeting first. Could you please look over our project proposal and ideas first? Lu Xinzong reached for the remote, planning to project the contents of his assistant's laptop onto the big screen. Jean Jingting didn't say anything, his cool gaze sweeping over Lu Xinzong. Then he crossed his legs elegantly. It seems like Mr. Lu has done a lot of prep work, Kelson said to his two assistants. Okay, please show me. The assistants began the projection. Outside, Momo's little fingers swiftly tapped on his tablet, and Inen whispered to him, "Go, brother, go." Inside the room, Kelson set down his teacup, and the screen, which had just started to project the PPT, suddenly went black. The two children outside slapped their hands together to celebrate their success. Inside, there was surprise, shock, and panic. What's going on? Lu Xinzong looked at his assistant. What's happening? His two assistants were bewildered. Boss, the screen went black. There's no data at all. Boss, my laptop is the same. Suddenly it's dead. No matter what button they pressed, it wouldn't turn on. Lu Xinzong stared in shock, his mind blank for 3 seconds. This is impossible. How could this happen? Both at the same time? He rushed over and smashed the keys, but the screen remained black. Jean Jingting remained calm, but secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Someone was trying to sabotage the deal. They were definitely prepared. Mr. Lu, at this point, perhaps you should leave, Kelson said bluntly. I will be discussing business with Mr. Jean now. Wait. He was not giving up. He was hitting the keyboard frantically, like a cat on a hot tin roof. Kelson gave him 3 more minutes to salvage the situation, but to no avail. Lu Xinzong, now desperate, was forced to leave. As a result, Jean Jingting successfully signed a contract with Kelson without any further problems. Meanwhile, the children were circling the Lamborghini, their eyes full of awe. Daddy's car is so cool. I saw online this car is worth almost 100 million. With the contract signed, as they were leaving, Mu Bo walked beside Jean Jingting, his mind full of questions. President, what was that all about? A clown show? For everyone? Probably not. Jean Jingting put his hands in his pockets. Even though he didn't understand what had happened, he didn't underestimate his opponents. As they stepped outside, they saw the two children leaning against the Lamborghini, their arms crossed, smiling at Jean Jingting. Their eyes met again. The adults paused, and under the warm sun, they marveled at the children's good looks. Momo raised his tablet and asked confidently, "You're President Jean, right? We have something you need." This tone, this confidence made the men pause. These 5 or 6-year-olds were acting anything but childish. Seeing that they didn't believe him, Anin spoke up. My brother just crashed your competitors' computers. As a thank you, shouldn't you buy us something yummy? Hearing this, Mu Bo thought it was ridiculous. These two children had crashed their system, but their little faces were deadly serious. Mu Bo turned to the inscrutable president and then approached the two children, squatting down in front of them with a gentle expression. Let Uncle see. Momo handed him the tablet, his tone as fearless as a young calf. This is Shinzone Group's project proposal that I stole. He then showed him the time that the system had been crashed. Mubo paused, staring at the tablet, and looked at the two children again. Zhang Jingting stood still, with his men behind him. His calm face remained neutral, but when he saw the change on Mubo's face, his heart skipped a beat. Subconsciously, he believed what the children said. There were child prodigies in the world, but they were extremely rare. Had he just met two of them? Soon, Mubo stood up and returned the tablet. He patted both children on their heads with a smile. Then, Zhang Jingting approached the children. Mubo turned and reported quietly, "President, it's true. They did it." The godlike man with the perfect posture directed his gaze at the children, his voice gentle. "Where are your parents? Who are you? And who told you to do this?" His soft voice was like a gentle breeze, making the children very happy. Daddy was talking to them. "We just wanted some big chicken legs," Emoemo said, batting his eyes. His voice was adorable. "So we chose you to be the one to pay. This is a piece of cake. It's done in a minute." "What? A piece of cake?" Even Mubo and the rest of Zhang Jingting's men were shocked by the kid's words. Talk about a humble brag. The car door was opened. Zhang Jingting, intrigued by the two children, let them get in. Inside the moving Lamborghini, Zhang Jingting sat across from the children. "What else do you want to eat?" "Roast duck, foie gras, bubble tea." "Okay." He nodded. "You'll have it all." Mubo drove towards a restaurant owned by Junshin Group, and on the way, he kept looking in the rearview mirror. He thought the children looked a lot like the president. If the president wasn't a celibate, he thought his children would have been that old. 10 minutes later, in a high-end restaurant, a ceiling decorated with stars, the ambience of the pendant lights was just right. Near the window, Zhang Jingting sat across from the children. The waiter brought 2 top-grade fillet steaks, a huge platter of lobster, 2 bowls of black pepper beef spaghetti, 2 small snack platters, a large portion of foie gras, 2 duck legs, and a large Mexican meat pizza. The table was completely full, and it was so appetizing. Daddy was really extravagant. "Eat." The man's handsome face was warm and gentle. He had a unique affinity with the children. "Thank you." The children were happy. They rolled up their sleeves and started eating, as if they hadn't eaten in 800 years. They were completely unconcerned in front of Daddy. The man leaned back in his chair and got straight to the point. "So, tell me, whose children are you?" The chicken legs suddenly didn't taste as good. The two children paused. "So, this question, they couldn't avoid it? We don't have parents. We're orphans." And then suddenly became a little drama queen, tears shimmering in his eyes. "We were almost kidnapped by bad people, and we don't know who to trust." "Uncle, you really are a good person." Emomo choked up. "No wonder you've been so successful. Good people always get rewarded." Somehow, Zhang Jingting, who had always been cold-hearted and full of mistrust of humanity, was moved by these words. He himself had experienced losing his parents and could sympathize. He felt a sharp ache in his heart. "Eat, stop staring." Zhang Jingting handed the children tissues. "Don't cry. Wipe your tears. A man has to be strong." The children wiped their tears and continued to eat with tears in their eyes. They were soft and adorable. "Why did you help me?" Zhang Jingting knew it wasn't a coincidence, but he couldn't guess who had been pulling the strings. Mo and Mo and Inen looked up, holding onto their big duck legs. They said at the same time, "Because we felt you'd be a good person. You own a huge company. You must be very smart and kind." Grandfather said that the god of wealth only helps the kind. The children were so smart, anyone would be happy to hear that. Zhang Jingting coughed twice and held back his questions, organizing his words carefully. The two little guys were really hungry. In less than 10 minutes, they had finished everything. "Where are you staying tonight?" Zhang Jingting was curious. If he could get on the children's good side, maybe they would reveal who had been helping Lu Xinzong. He would be more careful in the future. These two genius hackers were so smart. If it wasn't illegal to employ children, he would. The boss was always looking out for talents. And Momo pouted, looking sad. Children who don't have a mommy or a daddy can only sleep in the streets. "It was so cold last night, we didn't even have blankets. We slept under a bridge with the beggars." Mu Bo, who was standing nearby, put his hand to his forehead. "What great acting!" Zhang Jingting's lips curled up slightly. Then, why don't you stay at my place tonight? He wanted to bring them back to investigate their background. That's great. Thank you, Dad. Uncle. What? The man's mind jolted. Thank you, rich CEO, Uncle. The children were quick on their feet. And just like that, without anyone knowing who was playing who, Mo and Unin, these two little clever foxes moved into the U Bamboo Villas. The Lamborghini was parked in the courtyard. Zhang Jingting dropped the children off, spoke to Butler Shin and Zhou Sa for a few words, and then left with Mu Bo. Wow, Daddy's house is so big. Anin, who had seen the world, looked around the house and couldn't help but sigh. His financial power is greater than Mommy's. Daddy's information is online. He's Silver City's top tycoon. A real deal. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Butler Shun and Zhou Sa were slicing fruit and speaking in hushed tones. Old Shin, have you noticed how much these two children look like young Master Zhang? Especially the eyes. You felt that too? Their eyes are exactly the same. Maybe they are from that woman 7 years ago. Butler Shin was deep in thought. Zhou Sa, after thinking for a moment, felt her heart skip a beat. These two are probably 6 years old. That makes sense. Hurry. Be careful how we take care of them. Butler Shun and Zhou Sa were incredibly happy. Without the president revealing the children's identities, Butler Shun and Zhou Sa naturally didn't ask. They did their best to take care of the children as if they were the young heirs. After a full half day of listening and observing, the two children came to the conclusion. Daddy doesn't have any pretty aunts in his house. He's still single. Anin's eyes lit up. It won't be long before Mommy becomes the mistress of this house. Daddy should be back soon, right? Looking at the sunset through the window, the children eagerly anticipated the return of the Lamborghini. They wanted to get to know Daddy, to become closer to him, and then find the right time to bring Mommy over for a reunion, so the four of them would never be separated again. At the Su Lin mansion, the elegant and unique little building was hidden by the lush green trees in the courtyard. Lin Banksia, in her sports gear, stepped out of the car and took out a basket from the trunk. It was filled with 7 or 8 types of fresh, rare herbs. You're back. And you greeted her and told her, I took Uncle Ming out in the courtyard for some sunshine today. I chatted with him a bit. When I got close to him, he wasn't shaking as much as before. He still can't talk, but I think he's beginning to trust us. Good. Lin Banksia was pleased. Thank you for helping me. You haven't even gone home these past few days. I don't need to go back to that place. And Yu's smile faded. In this lifetime, I want to live with pride and do what makes me happy. Lin Banksia felt sorry for Yu, but each family had their own difficulties. After entering the house, her subordinate, Xiao Hung, reported, Boss, we still haven't found the young masters. Their smartwatches are still turned off, and there's no news from Canada. But we did find something. Tell me. No need to worry. Lin Banksia began washing the herbs. They arrived in Silver City yesterday. The woman paused, frowning. Those little stinkers. I'll deal with you when I see you. Lin Banksia didn't act like a typical mother who had lost her children, desperate or frantic. She quickly resumed her task, knowing that her sons, with their high IQs, would never fall into the hands of bad people. Even the ones who did meet those two children would be in trouble if the children wanted it. Her priority was to prepare the medicine to heal Uncle Ming. Lin Banksia's medical skills came from her grandmother. She had learned from a young age, and she was naturally talented in Chinese medicine, and she also did a lot of in-depth research. All incurable diseases were only a matter of time for her. After a while, Xiao Hung said again, Boss, Yang Yiming's men are looking for you. And you, helping her with the herbs, said worriedly, Banksia, shouldn't we get the children back first? If they fall into his hands, they will be their biggest bargaining chip. Lin Banksia didn't raise her head. I'll check the situation later. The chances of them falling into his hands are low. Be careful. Of course. Lin Banksia's lips curved slightly. I can't die until they are in the ground. In the evening, at the Lin family villa, the grand, beautiful house shone under the setting sun. It was a luxury mansion worth over 100 million, but it wasn't in Yang Yiming's name. He couldn't sell it. He was used to living comfortably and shamelessly. He stayed there, subconsciously treating it as his own. Yang Yiming, who was hiding at home to avoid the public eye, was sitting on the living room sofa, sipping tea. His heart was uneasy, and he was worried about the missing company seals. Sieyueru, wearing a fur coat in the middle of the summer, with her makeup caked on, appeared at the top of the stairs. Yiming, that brat ruined Yi Yao's wedding with the Shu family. How will Yi Yao ever show her face in the entertainment industry again? The woman came downstairs. Can't you do something about it? She walked towards him, furious. She started yelling at her husband. Are you just going to let her get away with this? If you were trying, you could find her in 2 days, right? How can someone just disappear? Her anger came from her suspicion that her husband was being biased towards that brat and not making any effort to do anything about it. But the truth was he had looked but couldn't find her. He was just incompetent. Sieyueru continued to criticize and even insult Lin Bangxia in front of her husband in order to get justice for her daughter. At the entrance of the Lin family villa, Lin Bangxia could already hear the woman's voice. Her face hardened, and she stepped inside. She was stopped by 2 men. Sorry, no outsiders allowed. You're blind. I'm the owner of this villa. Lin Bangxia was prepared. She had brought 4 subordinates with her, but she decided to act on her own. She swept her leg and tripped the 2 men. Amateurs. Then she walked inside. Her powerful aura was like that of a queen, and her subordinates followed close behind. Just as she got to the living room door, she heard Sieyueru yell. Who doesn't know that she slept with a bum under a bridge? She left pregnant. She's probably too ashamed to show her face. Lin Bangxia stepped into the living room. How I left. You know the truth of that, don't you? Her sudden appearance made the couple turn to look at the entrance. They were both shocked, a typical reaction of someone who had something to hide. Yang Yiming also stood up from the sofa. 6 years ago, she almost lost her life here. Now, 6 years later, as she stepped through the same door, her feelings were complicated. But she didn't feel sad. Lin Bangxia's cold eyes targeted the 2 shameless culprits. Her mother's car accident and her grandparents' deaths all needed to be investigated. One day, she would make them pay. Why you? How did you get in here? Sieyueru, wanting to show her authority, pointed outside and screamed at her. Do you know that trespassing is illegal? Illegal? Lin Bangxia didn't even bother looking at her. She only had eyes for Yang Yiming. She walked forward, her gaze making him feel uneasy. From his subtle reaction, Bangxia concluded that her children weren't with him. She felt relieved. Her men stood at the door, which gave Lin Bangxia great confidence. Yang Yiming looked at her men, then at her. There were people guarding the entrance, but she had managed to get in. Yang Yiming was a little scared. Do you have the company seals? He asked boldly. Lin Bangxia stopped in front of the coffee table. She looked at his face with a cold gaze, and then she sat down on the sofa. She leaned back on the cushion, stretched out her arms, and looked around. It really hasn't changed after all these years. You haven't bought anything new. She mocked him, the familiar feeling pricking at her heart. Once, her laughter was a part of this house. Since we have a blood connection, I'll give you a gentle reminder. Lin Bangxia looked up, her expression serious. I've already sold this villa, so pack your things and move out. What? Yang Yiming's eyes widened. He looked at Sieyueru in shock, and then looked at the girl again in disbelief. Lin Bangxia, you're so unfilial. I'm your father. Without the president mentioning the children's identities, Butler Shun and Zhou San naturally didn't ask. They did their best to serve the children as if they were young heirs. After a full half-day of listening and observing, the 2 children finally concluded, Daddy's house doesn't have any pretty aunts. Daddy's still single. Anin's eyes lit up. It won't be long before Mommy becomes the lady of this house. Daddy should be back soon, right? Gazing at the sunset outside the window, the children were eagerly anticipating the return of the Lamborghini. They wanted to learn more about Daddy, to get closer to him, and find the right time to bring Mommy back for a reunion so that the family would never be separated again. At the Su Lin mansion, the exquisite little building was hidden by the lush green trees in the courtyard. Lin Bangxia, dressed in sports gear, got out of the car and took out a basket from the trunk, filled with 7 or 8 kinds of fresh and rare herbs. You're back, and you came out to greet her and said, I took Uncle Ming out in the yard for some sunshine today and chatted with him a bit. When I got close to him, he wasn't shaking as much as before. He still can't talk, but I think he is finally starting to let his guard down around us. Good. Lin Banksia was pleased. Thank you for your help. You haven't gone home these past few days. I don't need to go back to that place. And Yu's smile disappeared. I want to live with pride and happiness for once in my life. Lin Banksia felt sorry for Yu, but each family had their own struggles. After entering the house, her subordinate, Xiao Heng, reported, "Boss, we still haven't found the young masters. Their smartwatches are still turned off, and there's no news from Canada. But we did find a lead." "Tell me." "No need to worry." Lin Banksia started to wash the herbs. "They arrived in Silver City yesterday." The woman paused, her eyebrows furrowing. "Those little stinkers. I'll deal with you when I see you." Lin Banksia wasn't like a typical mother who had lost her children. She didn't act desperate or even frantic. She quickly resumed her work, believing that her sons, with their high IQ, wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. Anyone who messed with them would be in trouble if they wanted to. Her most important task right now was to prepare the medicine to heal Uncle Ming. Lin Banksia's medical skills came from her grandmother. She had been learning from her since she was a child. She also had a talent in traditional Chinese medicine and did a lot of in-depth research. All incurable diseases were only a matter of time for her. After a while, Xiao Heng added, "Boss, Yang Yiming's people are looking for you." And Yu, helping her with the herbs, said worriedly, "Banksia, shouldn't we bring the children back first? If they fall into his hands, they'll be his biggest bargaining chip." Lin Banksia didn't look up. "I'll check the situation later. It's unlikely they'll fall into his hands. Be careful." "Definitely." Lin Banksia's lips curved slightly. "I can't die before they're buried." In the evening, at the Lin family villa, the grand and beautiful house shone under the setting sun. It was a luxury home worth over 100 million, but it wasn't in Yang Yiming's name, so he couldn't sell it. He was used to living comfortably, and shamelessly he stayed there, subconsciously treating it as his own. Yang Yiming, who was trying to avoid the public eye, was sitting on the sofa in the living room, sipping tea. He was worried and anxious about the missing company seals. Xie Yueru, wearing a fur coat in the middle of the summer, with her makeup caked on, appeared at the top of the stairs. "Yiming, that brat ruined Yao's marriage with the Shu family. How will Yao ever show her face in the entertainment industry now?" The woman came downstairs. "You need to do something about it." She walked towards him, furious. She started yelling at her husband. "Are you just going to let her get away with this? If you were trying, you could find her in 2 days, right? How can someone just disappear?" Her anger stemmed from her belief that her husband was biased towards that brat and wasn't doing enough to stop her. But the truth was he had tried, but he couldn't find her. He was simply incompetent. Xie Yueru continued to criticize and even insult Lin Banksia in front of her husband in order to get justice for her daughter. At the entrance of the Lin family villa, Lin Banksia could already hear the woman's voice. Her face hardened, and she stepped inside. She was stopped by 2 men. "Sorry, no outsiders allowed." "You're blind. I'm the owner of this villa." Lin Banksia was prepared. She had brought 4 subordinates with her, but she decided to act on her own. She swept her leg and tripped the 2 men. "Amateurs." Then she walked inside with a powerful presence, her subordinates following close behind. Just as she got to the living room door, she heard Xie Yueru yell, "Who doesn't know that she slept with a bum under a bridge? She left pregnant. She's probably too ashamed to show her face." Lin Banksia stepped into the living room. "How I left? You know the truth of that, don't you?" Her sudden appearance made the couple turn to look at the entrance. They were both shocked, a typical reaction of someone who was guilty. Yang Yiming also stood up from the sofa. 6 years ago, she almost died here. Now, 6 years later, as she stepped through the same door, her feelings were complicated. But she didn't feel sad. Lin Banksia's cold eyes locked on the 2 shameless culprits. Her mother's car accident and her grandparents' deaths all needed to be investigated. One day, she would make them pay. "Why you? How did you get in here?" Xie Yueru, wanting to show that she was the lady of the house, pointed outside and screamed at her. "Do you know that trespassing is illegal?" "Illegal?" Lin Banksia didn't even bother looking at her. She only had eyes for Yang Yiming. She walked forward, her gaze making him feel uneasy. From his subtle reaction, Banksia concluded that her children weren't with him. She felt a sense of relief. Her men stood at the door, which gave Lin Banksia great confidence. Yang Yiming looked at her subordinates, then at her. There were people guarding the entrance, but she had managed to get in. Yang Yiming felt a little fear. "Do you have the company seals?" he asked boldly. Lin Banksia stopped in front of the coffee table. Her cold gaze swept over his face, and then she sat down on the sofa. She leaned back on the cushion, stretched out her arms, and looked around. "It really hasn't changed. After all these years, you haven't bought anything new." She mocked him, the familiar feeling pricking at her heart. Once, her laughter was a part of this house. "Since we have a blood connection, I'll give you a gentle reminder." Lin Banksia looked up, her expression serious. "I've already sold this villa, so pack your things and move out." "What?" Yang Yiming's eyes widened. He looked at Xieyueru in shock, then looked at the girl again in disbelief. "Lin Banksia, you're so unfilial. I'm your father." Before Banksia could speak, Xieyueru exploded. She rushed towards her and yelled, "You little brat! Who do you think you are? What gives you the right to sell this house? This is your parents' joint property. Your father isn't dead yet." Lin Banksia's lips curved slightly. She just laughed mockingly. Then, she calmly stood up. Just then, Lin Yao, having heard the commotion, appeared at the top of the stairs. She was wearing slippers, and her hair was loose. She had on a pink princess dress. Lin Banksia, who was about to leave, inadvertently looked up and saw the girl's shocked and angry face. Lin Yao, gripping the railing tightly, remembered the scene when Lin Banksia had ruined her wedding. She was furious, but looking at that pretty face that filled her with jealousy, was this Lin family's eldest daughter coming back to steal her place? Lin Banksia's lips curved again. She smiled mockingly at the girl, and then turned to leave. "Grab her! Don't let her escape!" Xieyueru reacted quickly and screamed at the door. "Grab her!" Lin Banksia kept walking firmly. But in fact, the security guards in the yard had already been subdued by Lin Banksia's men. They were injured and crying out in pain. Lin Yao quickly went downstairs. When she reached the entrance, she saw the terrible scene in the courtyard and saw Lin Banksia and her people getting into their car and leaving. Even her parents were helpless against her. "That damned woman," Lin Yao said, spitting on the ground. But she knew that fighting her head-on wouldn't work. She needed a plan. Xieyueru, who always took the upper hand, was furious when she saw the security guards in the courtyard. "You're all useless. What are you good for? You couldn't even stop the thief." After venting her anger at the door, she pulled her fur coat tighter around her and turned around. She saw her husband sitting on the sofa, pouring himself some tea. "Yiming!" The woman walked towards him, her hips swaying. "What are we going to do? We had her all lined up, and she got away. And she's going to sell the house? It's not even in her name, is it?" Yang Yiming looked at his wife, and after a few seconds, he said calmly, "The house is in her name." Xieyueru's eyes widened, and her heart sank. And the way Lin Banksia looked, she wasn't joking. Lin Yao didn't say anything. She didn't care about the house. What did it matter where she lived? Anyway, her father had money, and he still controlled the Lin Corporation. The more Lin Banksia disregarded their relationship and upset her parents, the less likely she was to come back to the Lin family. Therefore, she probably wouldn't be able to steal her place as the eldest daughter, right? The sun was setting. The Lamborghini, with its gleaming body, slowly drove into the courtyard of the Yu Bamboo Villas. As the car stopped, someone rushed to open the door. "Welcome back, young Master Zhan." Zhan Jingting, with his perfect posture, got out of the car. The setting sun enveloped his elegant figure. There was a trace of warmth in his expression. Upstairs, seeing Daddy returning, the two children jumped for joy and hurried downstairs. "How are the children?" the man asked warmly as he entered the house. "Boss uncle, handsome uncle." Before Zhou Sa and Butler Shun could answer, the two children appeared on the stairs, looking excited. When Zhan Jingting saw the children, he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Butler Shun and Zhou Sa, seeing young Master Zhan's warm expression, We're very happy. Young Master Jean, dinner will be ready soon. We've prepared everything you requested. Children, wash your hands and let's eat. Jean Jingding took off his coat and handed it to Zhou Sa. Yay! That's great! The two children happily went to wash their hands, and then they all went into the dining room. In the luxurious dining room, on the white table, there were two top-grade fillet steaks, a huge platter of lobster, black pepper beef spaghetti, small snack platters, French foie gras, roast duck legs, and a Mexican meat pizza. They had also made soup. The children exchanged surprised looks, then sat down at the table, looking at the man sitting opposite them. Thank you, boss uncle. These are all our favorites. First question, what are your names? Jean Jingting asked gently as he picked up his fork. Emomo raised his hand. Lin Yimo, I'm the older brother, and then raised his hand. Lin Ian, I'm the younger brother. I was only born 1 minute after my brother. Even though the two children looked identical, Jean Jingting had a sharp eye for detail. After just a few minutes, he could tell who was the older brother and who was the younger brother. Okay, the man nodded, satisfied with the first answer. So, for the second question, are you comfortable here? We're used to living under a bridge, so living in this big house is even better. Emomo laughed and looked at his brother. We really like it here. Yes, we really like it. Jean Jingding nodded again, and then said thoughtfully, so, how about you call your dad or mom? You've been out for so long. Your parents must be worried. The two children paused. Looking at him, they felt guilty for deceiving him. Jean Jingting continued to eat his food without looking up. But Mo continued the act. He blinked his eyes. Uncle, we're orphans. We don't have a mommy or a daddy. Are you going to kick us out? Uncle Linen's voice choked. We're not bad kids. If you don't trust us, we'll just go back under the bridge tonight. We don't want to cause any trouble for you. Jean Jingting knew that the children were acting, but seeing their tearful faces, he felt a pang in his heart and softened immediately. No, I didn't say that. Uncle. Emomo looked at him tentatively and said carefully, that project proposal for Lu Xinzong wasn't made by his people. Someone sent it to his email. The little boy was trying to remind him that someone was supporting the Xinzong group. Jean Jingding looked up. When he looked at the children, he paused for a moment and then said, eat quickly or it will get cold. Emomo and Unin exchanged a look. Daddy didn't believe them? After dinner, the children had free reign of the villa. They were so familiar with it already, they were treating it as if it were their home. Zhou Sa and Butler Shin were personally taking care of them, afraid that they would get hurt. The children's room for the night was located next to Jean Jingting's master bedroom. Zhou Sa had already decorated it with a child-friendly theme. In the study, the man stood by the window, talking on the phone. His brow was slightly furrowed under the light. Okay, continue to investigate. Mu Bo was investigating the children's background, but he didn't have any leads yet. Oh, and someone is supporting the Xinzong group. Follow them. He didn't want to ask the children directly. He didn't want to lose face. Understood, President. After he hung up, Jean Jingding turned around and walked out of the study. He saw the two children holding hands and walking towards the balcony, acting suspiciously. The man quietly closed the door and followed them. On Momo's smartwatch, a number was dialing. Soon, someone answered. At the Su Lin mansion, Lin Banksia had just finished sorting her medicine when she sat down in a chair and answered the call. Her face was cold, and she remained silent. The most beautiful mommy. Don't be angry, Momo's voice was soft. His apology was genuine. My brother and I are safe, and we are taking good care of ourselves. Jean Jingting's eyes darkened. So they were lying. He followed the children all the way to the balcony. He then turned around and hid, eavesdropping on the conversation. Yes, my brother and I are back in Silver City, but you wouldn't let us come with you. Where are you now? Lin Banksia asked coldly. She was seething with anger. Don't worry, we're at Daddy's house. Momo whispered. Daddy is very nice. We helped him with a little favor, and he trusts us and is letting us stay here. Jean Jingting's blood ran cold. His eyes darkened. These two little cubs were his sons? Daddy. On the other end, Lin Banksia jumped out of her chair. I don't even know who your daddy is. What are you saying? This is a serious matter. Are you trying to get yourself killed? Mommy, calm down. The children could sense her anger, and then lowered his voice as much as he could. "We're not just calling anyone daddy. He really is daddy, we promise." And Momo added, "Mommy, you've raised us for 6 years. It must have been so hard. You should let him help you out for once. I'm warning you. Give me the address now. I'm coming to get you." She was going crazy. "Help me out. What if he takes you away? You won't see your mommy ever again." "That won't happen. And Momo and Inen aren't fools. You can't just call anyone daddy." Lin Banksia was panicking. Seeing how upset Mommy was, Momo quickly explained, "How could we just call anyone daddy? We hacked into the hotel system and checked the footage. 7 years ago, this man went into your room during the day, and he stayed there for 6 whole hours." Hearing this, the memory of their intimate encounter flooded into Zhang Jingting's mind. Was it really 6 hours? Was it? On the other end of the phone, Lin Banksia was shocked. It seemed like her children had made up their minds and weren't coming home tonight. She closed her eyes, her heart pounding, and asked quietly, "Who is your daddy?" "Zhang Jingting." Anin replied directly, "CEO of the Junshin Group, the richest man in Silver City. Mommy, you have good taste." He was satisfied with daddy and didn't forget to compliment her. Zhang Jingting hid his shock, his handsome face stiffened. The children continued, "Mommy, you've been taking care of us for 6 years. It must have been so hard. It's time for daddy to share the burden." "Okay, Mommy, good night. We just wanted to let you know we were safe. We're gonna sleep. Bye." Lin Banksia was completely panicked. How would she have known that her children were determined to find their daddy, so that she wouldn't have to work so hard? They believed that among all the men in the world, only daddy, Zhang Jingting, could protect her and help her achieve her revenge. All these years, they had seen their mommy's struggles. Her sensible children had been watching closely. Grandpa was such a bad man. That night, before he went to bed, Zhang Jingting received a call from Mu Bo. "President, I've found out." The 2 children came from Canada. They went straight to the club after they arrived in Silver City. It seems that they come from a single-parent family, and their mother is Lin Banksia. Lin Banksia? That day, he had asked Mu Bo to investigate that woman. After ruining the wedding, she had been chased by people and had gotten into his car. He seemed to have smelled the faint scent of herbs coming from her. Zhang Jingting slowly put his phone down. He couldn't help but recall what her stepmother had said in front of everyone when she had ruined the wedding. "Lin Banksia, how dare you show your face? You got knocked up by some bum living under a bridge, and then you ran off with him. Nobody could stop you." Then, a group of people said that she was shameless and started gossiping. He had been there listening too. So, he was that bum under the bridge? He was speechless. After hanging up with Mu Bo, Zhang Jingting called another number and quietly gave some instructions. 10 minutes later, a black car drove into the courtyard. Zhang Jingting went downstairs. He put the children's toothbrushes and his own toothbrush into 2 specimen bags and handed them to a man in the yard. "I need the results as soon as possible." "Yes, young Master Zhang." The man nodded, got into the car, and drove away. This issue regarding the Zhang family's bloodline needed to have solid evidence. As he went upstairs, Zhang Jingting's heart felt heavy. Before he went back to his bedroom, he found his feet taking him to the children's room. He hesitated for a few seconds. No one knew what he was thinking. He then turned the doorknob and gently opened the door. In the room, which was lit by a small night light, the children were sound asleep. He walked quietly into the room, his slippers making no sound on the carpet. His soft gaze rested on the 2 sleeping little boys. He felt fatherly love grow within him. Blood was a human instinct. This wealthy man had been severely wounded by humanity. His parents had died a tragic death, and he was full of mistrust. He lowered his body next to their beds and gently tucked them in. This was the first time he had taken the initiative to care for anyone. That night, Zhang Jingting drank some wine, and he thought about that evening 7 years ago. He couldn't fall asleep. His feelings for that woman were complicated. He felt some guilt, but also an obsession. That night, Lin Banksia was completely distracted. Those smart children of hers had suddenly done something so ridiculous. They had found out who their daddy was, but hadn't told her their mommy. Instead, they had gone to him directly. In the middle of the night, she was in the living room with her laptop. She was looking up information about Zhang Jingting online. While she was searching, she suddenly felt a pang in her heart. "Oh my God! What's wrong?" And you, who had been startled, asked. Lynn Banksia stared at the man's face on the screen. She remembered that it was his car that she had gotten into when she ruined the wedding, and that she had even sat on his lap. What a strange fate. And you walked over to her and sat down next to her. Her gaze also fell on the screen. A powerful alliance. People always say that marriage is a woman's second chance at life. If you could marry young Master Jean, your terrible father would have to crawl back to you. Mary. Lynn Banksia frowned and said anxiously, "I'm worried that he'll try to take my children away from me." That's right. Who wouldn't want a child who was so smart and adorable? Don't worry. He won't be able to take them away. The children's opinions are important. They've always wanted to have a daddy and fatherly love. You can't control them forever. That same night, at the Lin family villa, Yang Yiming had taken a shower, but he was still in a bad mood. The company's seals hadn't been found. Lin Banksia had provoked him again, and had even come into his house to beat his people. The brat had clearly become stronger, but he couldn't do anything to her. Unlike back then, she had learned to be cautious. "Yiming, we can't just let this happen." Sieyueru was worried about her daughter's future. Lin Banksia was obviously provoking us today. If we don't eliminate her, I'm afraid there will be more trouble in the future. Stop yelling all the time. I want to get rid of her too. But do you think it's still the same as 7 years ago? Yes, she had already become aware of them. Just as the couple were about to go upstairs and go to bed, a voice came from outside the living room, and then a group of people broke down the door. They frightened the couple, who were preparing to go upstairs. "Who are you? Are you robbers?" Sieyueru screamed. Yang Yiming frowned. "What's going on?" Soon, a wealthy-looking couple came in. They were also around the same age. Their faces showed their satisfaction with the house. They looked around, and then at Yang Yiming and Sieyueru. "Miss Lin didn't give you any notice? She's already sold this house. We're the new owners, and we're staying here tonight," the middle-aged woman said. The man, however, wasn't so patient. He looked at his subordinates. "Go upstairs and pack up their things. Throw all their clothes down here and remove any personal belongings. Oh, and change the locks." Sieyueru and Yang Yiming, in their pajamas, looked completely helpless. Then, from upstairs, they heard Lin Yao screaming. "Ah, what are you doing? You're perverts." Before Sieyueru could rush upstairs, Lin Yao, wearing pajamas and wrapped in a blanket, appeared on the stairs, her face filled with panic. She stumbled several times. "Mom! Mom!" Sieyueru hugged her daughter, who had just run down the stairs. She yelled in anger. "Do you even respect the law? You're trespassing. I'm calling the police. I'll have you all arrested." She then began to pull out her phone. Yang Yiming stopped her. "Enough. Let's just pack up and leave." The buyer's wife smiled and said, "Mr. Yang, you're a reasonable man." Yang Yiming's face was dark. He suppressed his anger, but he knew that if the police came, they might end up being the ones who had broken the law, because Lin Banksia had already sold the house. Soon, some clothes were thrown down from upstairs. The people were rough. A few empty boxes were also thrown down, almost hitting their feet. The Lin family's maid, seeing this, cautiously glanced at Yang Yiming and Sieyueru, and then stepped forward. With a pounding heart, she began to pack the scattered clothes into suitcases. Yang Yiming called for a car. The people changing the locks were fast. "Sir, madam, the locks have been changed. Come over here and register your fingerprint and password." "Dad, Mom." Lin Yao finally came to her senses. She looked at them in disbelief. "What's going on? Are we being kicked out? Has the house been sold?" Yang Yiming was silent, his face cold. He hadn't expected Lin Banksia to be so quick and decisive. He cared more about his reputation than the house itself. He had worked hard to maintain his good name these past few years. Sieyueru hugged her daughter, also feeling the strange looks from those around her. In an unprecedented state of helplessness, she watched them give the luxurious house away. Her heart was bleeding. It was heartbreaking. All that they could take with them from the house was a few pieces of clothing. The family of 3 were still wearing their pajamas. They were being thrown out on the street in the middle of the night. The boxes were thrown out into the yard. The front door was slammed shut. Yang Yiming's car hadn't arrived yet. The driver was rushing over. Suddenly, a group of reporters swarmed outside, as if they had been waiting for them, and began to bombard them with questions. Mr. Yang, what happened in the middle of the night? Did Miss Lin sell the villa? Mr. Yang, can you say something? Is it impossible to fix your relationship with your daughter? Mr. Yang, what are your plans now? Do you have any other properties? For someone who cared so much about their reputation, this was a nightmare. Those reporters had obviously been sent by Lin Banxia. They were all asking questions in a hypocritical manner. Lin Yao was covering her face with a blanket. How would she ever be able to go back to the entertainment industry? It was so embarrassing. At night, at the Su Lin mansion, Lin Banxia was lying in bed. Because of that phone call with her sons, she was tossing and turning, unable to sleep. After checking Zhang Jingting's information, her mind was full of the image of their intimate encounter 7 years ago. Her children's father was the richest man in Silver City, Zhang Jingting. It was said that he didn't like women and that he had experienced some family tragedy when he was young, and that he distrusted humanity and marriage. So, would he try to take her children away? No, she needed to go to his company tomorrow. The children wouldn't leave him voluntarily, so she had to start with him. She had to ask him to give up his custody rights. At 3 o'clock in the morning, at the U Bamboo Villas, a night light was still on in the master bedroom. In a single chair in front of the window, Zhang Jingting, wearing loungewear, held a glass of wine. His dark eyes were focused on the night outside. He also couldn't sleep because he had overheard the children's phone call. Finally, the phone rang. The man leaned forward, picked up the phone, and swiped to answer. Speak. Young Master Zhang, the DNA test results are in. The 2 children are yours. He was told. The digital copy of the report has been sent to your email. Okay. Before hanging up, Zhang Jingting specifically said, for now, don't tell anyone about this. Yes, young Master Zhang. These 2 clever children were his sons, Zhang Jingting's sons. 7 years ago, that woman had been pregnant with his child. Zhang Jingting, who never changed his expression in the face of danger, now showed a change in his face. It was difficult for him to process this information. That night, he barely slept. His mind was full of the image of that woman. In the morning, when he opened his bedroom door, he saw the 2 children, all dressed and ready, standing outside. Boss uncle, good morning. Their voices were soft and sweet. The 2 little children were cool and handsome, wearing matching glasses. They looked like international child stars. The children took off their glasses and smiled happily at him. Zhang Jingting was touched. In the children's eyes, he could see that they missed him, and that they had a purpose for getting close to him. The man smiled warmly, like a loving father. He bent down and picked up the 2 children. Good morning. And in MOMO. He picked up the 2 children and walked downstairs. His arm strength was impressive, and also his fatherly love was bursting. The children were delighted by this gesture. They hugged his handsome face and gave him a big kiss. Mwah, mwah. In the dining room, Zhang Jingting sat the 2 children in their chairs. The table was covered with a variety of nutritious breakfasts. Eat whatever you like. Momo and Inen were very happy. They smiled at him. They could still smell Daddy's scent on them. While they were eating breakfast, Zhang Jingting asked them again, Did you sleep well last night? Yes, the 2 children said in unison. The man was pleased with their answer. Good. If you're comfortable here, then just stay here. You don't have to sleep under a bridge anymore. Think of this place as your own home. With children in his life, how could Grandpa pressure him about marriage? Imo and Inen paused and looked at each other. Then they looked at him. Yay! Thank you for letting us stay. Actually, Zhang Jingting thought for a moment and then looked up and said gently, I wouldn't mind if you called me Daddy. I'm single, unmarried, and I like children. The 2 children were stunned again, but then they began to smile. Was this telepathy? Can we really call you Daddy? Momo asked tentatively. Zhang Jingting just smiled. Well, I am Daddy, aren't I? The 2 children exchanged a guilty look. They were both so smart, Daddy must be intelligent too. So Daddy knew everything? So the little guys began apologizing, their survival instincts kicking in. We just wanted a daddy so badly, so we tried to get close to you, sorry. Daddy, I love you. And it was a good actor. His eyes were full of tears. Don't cry. Don't cry. Jean Jingting was already happy. How could he be angry? He had been absent from their lives for 6 years. He wanted to make up for it. Today's news headlines were all about Yang Yiming and the others. With his status, this news must have cost Lin Bangxia a lot of money. President of the Lin Group, thrown out of his mansion in the middle of the night, wearing pajamas, completely humiliated. What's the relationship between Yang Yiming and Lin Bangxia? How many daughters does the Lin family have? The real Lin family heiress has returned. One twist after another, the show is just beginning. Why did Lin Bangxia disappear suddenly 6 years ago? And how did Lin Yao become the Lin family's eldest daughter? Various posts about the father and daughter's relationship emerged. The video of the wedding chaos was also brought back into public view. In the video, Yang Yiming looked furious, and the carefully arranged wedding venue was a mess. The guests were running around everywhere. In the Lamborghini, driving to the Junxing group, Jean Jingting, dressed in a high-end suit, looked handsome and refined. He was holding a tablet, and he saw the news about Yang Yiming and his wife being thrown out of the Lin family villa last night. He recalled the wedding chaos that he had personally witnessed that day, and he also thought about how smart and cunning those two children were. Jean Jingting thought Lin Bangxia was not a simple woman. She was brave, resourceful, and a little wild. Lin Bangxia, who had barely slept the entire night, had a nightmare at 4 o'clock in the morning. She dreamt that her sons had been taken away, and she woke up startled, covered in sweat. She couldn't calm down for a long time. She knew her sons' personalities too well. There was very little chance they would show themselves voluntarily. They were determined to find their daddy. Therefore, she decided to have a talk with the children's father. She had to get back custody of her children. Her car stopped at the entrance of the Junxing Group's main building. Lin Bangxia had just gotten out of the car and hadn't even walked 2 steps when Xu Qingyun, who worked there, saw her and rushed over excitedly. Bangxia, his enthusiastic voice, startled her. She backed away quickly, looking at the man rushing towards her with alarm. Don't you remember me? I was the groom at your sister's wedding. He then added, but I don't blame you at all. I didn't want to marry her anyway. Lin Bangxia looked at him blankly. First of all, Lin Yao is not my sister. Even though he brought it up himself, she still couldn't remember him. Bangxia, it doesn't matter. Whether she's your sister or not isn't the point. Listen to me. My grandfather is seriously ill, and I just came back to the country. When he said he wanted to arrange a marriage with the Lin family, I immediately agreed because I thought it was you. I thought you had changed your name to Lin Yao. The man looked at her as if he had been saved. He added, I only found out that it was the wrong person half an hour before the wedding. My grandfather threatened to kill himself, and it was also about the Xu family's reputation, so Xu Qingyun looked at her with stars in his eyes. Don't be angry. I like you. Let's date. I'll go back and tell my grandfather now, and we'll have another wedding. Just then, the Lamborghini slowed down and stopped nearby. The car door opened. Mister, calm down. Lin Bangxia raised her hand, her expression serious. She was dumbfounded by his enthusiasm. I don't even know you. Those words landed in Jean Jingting's ear as he got out of the car. He recognized that voice, and he looked up. We know each other now, and we've met before. Xu Qingyun was very interested in her, and said confidently, Bangxia, I don't care if you're the Lin family's eldest daughter or not, whether you're favored by them, and I don't care if you got pregnant by a bum under a bridge or ran away with him. I'm willing to marry you. Lin Bangxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She had never experienced anything so ridiculous. About 5 meters behind them, Jean Jingting stopped and watched the woman, his cold face slightly changing. A child from a bum under a bridge? So, that was how that woman had described herself back then. Bangxia, please think about it. Xu Qingyun asked, his eyes pleading. Mr. Xu, I think you got the wrong idea. Lin Bangxia was still very composed. She stood up straight, her skin fair and smooth. I didn't ruin your wedding because I wanted to marry you. I don't even know you, but I know you. The man's eyes sparkled. We met at a party when we were little, and we even said hi to each other. I fell in love with you at first sight. Jean Jingting's eyebrows furrowed slightly. What he was saying sounded disgusting, but he quickly came back to his senses and walked towards the company lobby. He turned around and caught sight of Lin Bangxia. She left Xu Qingyin behind and quickly chased after him. Young Master Jean. The man didn't stop, and he instructed the security guards at the door, "Stop her." The next second, two security guards stopped her. "I'm sorry, but non-company personnel are not allowed inside." Jean Jingting. Lin Bangxia stamped her feet anxiously. She shouted at his back, "Jean Jingting, what are you playing at? I have something important to discuss with you." He definitely knew that she was the children's mother. That was why he was avoiding her. Lin Bangxia always trusted her judgment. The man's back soon disappeared into the elevator. She knew that she couldn't force her way in. That would be unbecoming. She turned around and got back into her car. Lin Bangxia began to think about why he was avoiding her. She analyzed the situation for a while, then picked up her phone and called her sons. In the luxurious villa, Momo's smartwatch rang. When he saw the caller ID, he held his breath. Anin, who was next to him, was also a little scared. "Brother, answer it. Even if mommy is going to kill us, we have daddy to protect us now. We have a shield." The little boy swiped to answer. "Su Lin Mansion. I need to see you in half an hour." Lin Bangxia's voice was cold. She hung up the phone before the children could speak. The two little boys realized the seriousness of the situation. As they were heading to the yard, Zhou Sa stopped them. "Where are you going, young masters?" "We're just going out for a bit. We'll be back soon," Zhou Sa said. "Young Master Jean specifically told me that you were not allowed to leave without his permission." What? Had the battle between Daddy and Mommy already begun? Luckily, they had saved Daddy's number this morning. Soanin called Daddy. "Daddy, we want to go out for half a day, but Zhou Sa won't let us. Your daddy has a lot of enemies. It's safer for you to stay at home." Jean Jingting said, "Be good. Daddy will bring you back presents." Then, the line went dead. In the minimalist but luxurious CEO's office of the Junshin Group, Mu Bo, who had heard the call, was in complete shock. "Your daddy has a lot of enemies, Daddy." "Daddy?" After hanging up, Jean Jingting picked up his computer and was about to head to a meeting. When he saw how shocked Mu Bo looked, he was surprised. "What's wrong?" "President, those two children are my sons." The man's lips curled slightly, and he said a little proudly, "Aren't they handsome, just like me?" Seeing his boss walk away and sensing his happiness, Mu Bo, who had been working for him for so many years, felt a little lost. This unsmiling, ice-cold man actually had such a warm side to him. The power of fatherly love. Meanwhile, at the Su Lin mansion, Lin Bangxia was watching the clock, waiting for her sons to return. If they were even a second late, they would be punished. Soon, Anin's call came in. She saw the caller ID, and her heart sank. She answered the call. "What is it?" "Mommy, we're being protected by Daddy. There are a few men guarding the entrance. Zhou Sa told us that we can't leave without Daddy's permission." Momo's voice came through as well. "Mommy, we really weren't lying to you. Look for yourself." The voice call switched to video. Through the video, Lin Bangxia saw several men standing at the entrance. Her face hardened immediately. She got up from the sofa and hung up. "Xiao Heng, take a few men with you and go get the young masters at the Yu Bamboo Villas." "Yes, boss." Lin Bangxia recalled the way Jean Jingting had ignored her that morning. He had been so aloof and arrogant. She was furious. Today, she would take her children back. Then, she would send them to Canada. Half an hour later, at the Yu Bamboo Villas, the two little boys, wearing sunglasses, were lying on deck chairs, enjoying the sun on the balcony. Their short legs were dangling freely. A small table was filled with all kinds of cakes and fruit. "Brother, do you think Mommy is going to be angry?" Anin's little face was chubby. "Of course she's going to be angry. I think only Daddy will be able to save us." Anin said, "I think Daddy will get punished too. I can already imagine how Mommy will punish us, but I don't regret it at all." "What about you?" "I don't regret it either. We miss Daddy, and there's nothing wrong with that. Who wouldn't want a father?" Just then, there was the sound of fighting in the yard. The two boys' ears twitched. They took off their glasses and quickly got up, looking at the entrance. "Mommy!" The two boys exchanged a look of disbelief and then quickly ran downstairs. Thump! Thump! The two brothers rushed out onto the stairs. Why were they fighting? Outside the courtyard, 4 cars were parked. Lynn Banksia had brought 20 fighters. They were in a serious conflict now. The fighting was intense. "Mommy!" The children ran downstairs and towards the living room. Butler Shin grabbed them. "My mommy's here. She's fighting." The children were anxious and struggled to break free. "Let me go! Let me go!" Butler Shin had no choice but to take them outside. Zhou Sa also noticed the commotion outside. She was so scared that she quickly grabbed the phone and dialed a number. As soon as the call connected, she said frantically, "And not good, young Master Zhan. The children's mommy has come and started a fight." Zhan Jingting, who was in a meeting, had a cold, sharp look in his eyes. "How many people are there? 10, 20 maybe? There are so many." Zhou Sa was terrified. Zhan Jingting hung up the phone. He then dialed another number in the meeting room and said coldly, "Send 100 men to U Bamboo right now to protect my children. Also, do not hurt the woman. After all, she is their mother." Hearing this, all the executives in the meeting room looked at him in shock. They thought they had misheard him. Holding the phone in his hand, Zhan Jingting slowly looked around, seeing the gossipy expressions on everyone's faces. His lips curled slightly. "Yes, I have children, 2 of them." His face was full of pride. "They've not only inherited my good looks, but also my intelligence." Then, the meeting room filled with enthusiastic applause. "Congratulations, President! Congratulations! You've been blessed with sons." Mu Bo will continue with the meeting. "I have some family matters to deal with first." He patted Mu Bo on the shoulder and then left. At the U Bamboo Villas, the people Lin Banksia brought were all skilled fighters, but Zhan Jingting's men were also well trained. Even though they were outnumbered, they weren't losing. "Stop fighting! Stop fighting! That's my mommy! No one is allowed to hurt her." The two boys still had a conscience. In reality, Lin Banksia hadn't made a move. She was standing there, wearing a red dress and high heels. Her arms were crossed, her aura powerful. "Mommy, tell them to stop fighting. My brother and I will go with you." If the two started by fighting, how would Mommy and Daddy ever get along? Zhou Sa must have called Daddy, and maybe Daddy would be back soon. "Young masters, please stay back." Butler Shin pulled them back. "Without young Master Zhan's permission, you can't leave. Please come in and avoid getting hurt." Lin Banksia glared coldly at those 2 disloyal children, but she didn't try to grab them. She simply glared. She didn't believe that with all this commotion, Zhan Jingting wouldn't be notified. If he was avoiding her at the company, then they could just meet at home, right? Soon, a row of black SUVs came roaring in. The sound was deafening. It startled Lin Banksia. She crossed her arms and looked sideways. She saw over a dozen cars stop. Their doors opened almost simultaneously. Black-suited men who were all over 6 feet tall came out. They were obviously fighters. "Oh, crap!" Her eyes flickered, and she dropped her arms. The fighters walked towards the entrance and then joined the fight, passing Lin Banksia. 20 people against over 100 people. The difference in strength was huge. In less than a minute, Lin Banksia's men were completely defeated. 2 men held down each fighter. They were kneeling down, crying out in pain. The remaining 60 or so men were standing there, ramrod straight. Lin Banksia was stunned. Then, a Lamborghini slowed down and entered the yard. Lin Banksia stared hatefully at the car as it stopped. The door opened, and Zhan Jingting got out. "Hello, young Master Zhan." Everyone greeted him in unison. Their voices were full of respect and obedience. From the moment he got out of the car, Zhan Jingting's eyes locked onto the woman. Her features were delicate, her skin was fair, and she possessed a noble but rebellious air. She had a similar feeling to what she had felt that day in the church, but it was also different. Now, the look in Lin Banksia's eyes was full of hatred. Suddenly, 2 police cars arrived, entered the yard, and stopped. This was unexpected for Zhan Jingting. "I called the police." Lin Banksia looked at him. Her clear eyes were cold. Zhang Jingting had misunderstood. He said mockingly, trespassing, deliberately causing trouble. And you're still in the right? Accusing someone before they've done anything wrong? I'm accusing you of rape 7 years ago, Lin Banxia said. Zhang Jingting was surprised and a little shocked. With so many people listening, especially in front of his clever sons, it was incredibly embarrassing. Their eyes met. A storm was brewing. The police officers who had just gotten out of the cars had heard what the girl had said, and everyone knew that this was the U Bamboo Villas, young Master Jean's home. Lin Banxia said, Mr. Jean can deny it, but I have proof. Yes, this is a society governed by law, and everyone is equal before it. Hello, officers. Lin Banxia turned around, tears welling up in her eyes. She immediately became fragile and weak. 7 years ago, this man forced himself on me against my will. She pointed at Zhang Jingting, her voice breaking. Cough. Honey, don't make a scene. Zhang Jingting coughed lightly, stepped forward, and put his arm around her shoulder. He said softly, We've been secretly married for so long, and we even have children. I know you've been holding a grudge because I haven't given you a proper wedding. When I finish with work, I'll plan something. Lin Banxia looked at him with wide eyes. She was ready to fight back. What was he talking about? Just as she was about to protest, her little turncoat started talking. Yeah, Mommy, don't be angry at Daddy. Daddy is always so nice to you. He loves you so much. Officer, I'm sorry. My mommy is just throwing a tantrum. She's just saying stuff. They have a good relationship. Please go back. I'm so sorry. We bothered you. And then directly pushed the police officers towards their car. And Momo also turned around and helped. I'm sorry, officers. My mommy is being a little impulsive, but actually they have a great relationship. Don't listen to what my mommy says. Young Master Jean was married, and he had 2 children. Even the police officers were gossiping. Officers, Lin Banxia finally reacted. It's not like that. 7 years ago, he forced himself on me. Honey, don't make a scene. Zhang Jingting pulled her into a hug, his lips pressed against her pink ones. Under the warm sun, it was so sweet. Lin Banxia was shocked, her mind blank. His lips were cool like a spring, and her mouth was filled with his scent. Young Master Jean's wife. Just enjoy it. There's a long line of women waiting to marry him. The police officers knew their place and let out a sigh of relief. Lin Banxia pushed him away with force. Are you crazy? Yeah, you're my medicine. Zhang Jingting had a roguish look on his face. A gentle breeze swept past, and he once again smelled the subtle herbal scent coming from the woman. Before the police cars drove away, someone leaned out the window. Young Master Jean, I suggest that you reveal your wife's identity to the public. Every girl wants to have a title. If your wife didn't call us today, we would have thought you were still single. Yeah. Zhang Jingting's face was gentle as he looked at them. Thank you for your hard work. They had come all this way for nothing. After that, no matter how much Lin Banxia yelled at the police cars or stomped her feet, it was useless. With the help of her 2 children, no one believed what she said. This was obviously a love story. It was so sweet that it was like an idol drama. Once the police cars were gone, Zhang Jingting let go of her and said, his face immediately changing, You wanted to see me, didn't you? Let's go in and talk. The woman was desperately wiping her mouth. She was disgusted. As the man turned around, he told Butler Shin, Take the children to play in the yard for a while. Yes, sir. Mommy, hurry. And Momo urged. Half of our blood is Daddy's blood, and the other half is Mommy's blood. So you should discuss our custody issues. Mommy, Daddy, you need to sit down and talk nicely. Don't fight. Lin Banxia wanted to strangle those 2 little traitors. Remember this. I'll deal with you both when we get home. If you want to win custody, Mommy, you need to try harder. They didn't want to leave. They were so comfortable in this big house. Lin Yimo, Lin Ian, Lin Banxia really wanted to slap them. The children looked at her with tears in their eyes and pouted as if they were about to cry. We just want a father. What's wrong with that? All the other kids have daddies. Lin Banxia's heart softened. She suddenly felt guilty and that she had let them down. Her people were still being controlled by Zhang Jingting's men. She was clearly at a disadvantage. And at that moment, the man's back had already disappeared into the living room. For the sake of her children, Lynn Banksia had no choice but to talk to him. She walked towards the living room. The villa was large. The living room alone was almost 200 square meters. The furnishings showed the owner's taste. Even a small decoration was priceless. In the leather sofa, Zhang Jingding was pouring tea. His face was cold. Today's meeting was very important. The fact that she had made him go home to deal with things, he was unhappy, and she had even called the police. Therefore, he was not pleased. The Zhang family is a respectable family. Don't let your recklessness cause the police to get involved. If this goes online, neither of us will look good. If you know that you need to be respectable, then why don't you act like a respectable person? Lin Banxia's tone was flat. Zhang Jingting looked up. His cold eyes could freeze the surrounding air. Who knows if you're trying to trick me, setting me up to sleep with you? You. The girl was about to faint from anger. Don't worry. I will investigate this. The man's tone was devoid of warmth. If he had been tricked, he would settle the score with her. Then you better investigate it properly. She wasn't going to let him off easily. Prove my innocence. Give me some compensation, or you'll go to jail. Zhang Jingting took a sip of tea. His gaze narrowed as he changed the subject. Lin Banksia, right? How much money did you spend raising the children for 6 years? I'll pay you double. The children are not yours. She sat down on the sofa opposite him. Don't dream about it. I'm here to take them away today. Take them? Where are you going? The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Are you going to send them back to Canada? Victoria, he had investigated her. The girl's chest tightened. She looked up and met the man's deep gaze. She felt like she had nowhere to run. Their eyes met. It was obvious. Zhang Jingting had much more information about her, putting her at a disadvantage. As their eyes met, the scene from that night 7 years ago flooded into both of their minds. Her cheeks flushed. Lin Banksia pulled her gaze away quickly. Just tell me your terms. I need to leave with my children today. Children are not objects. They are independent people with thoughts of their own. Zhang Jingding stated the facts. Even if I let them go today, they might not go with you. They flew all the way back to me on their own. That should show you where I stand in their hearts. He sounded proud of it. Lin Banksia was furious. It didn't feel right. He hadn't done anything for 6 years, and now he wanted to take all the credit. He wanted to steal her children away from her. His phone rang. The man glanced at the caller ID and hung up. Look, I'll ask Zhou Sa to prepare a room for you. If you miss your children, you can choose to move in. He didn't want to argue. This was the greatest concession that Zhang Jingting was willing to make. The man analyzed logically. If you leave the children here with me, you will have nothing to worry about. You can focus on your battle with your scum of a father and stepmother. You investigated me? Lin Banksia was angry. Zhang Jingting, don't think you're doing me a favor. You're trying to take my children away from me. Miss Lin Banksia, without me, would you even be able to have children? Their eyes met again, and again she was speechless. Zhang Jingting reminded her. Also, don't call the police again. The children wouldn't want us to be enemies. We all need to be healthy, if not for ourselves, then for the children. This woman had actually called the police. Her logic was very strange. In Silver City, there were so many women who tried everything to get into his bed. As the two were arguing, with each holding their ground, the two children, who had been hiding outside the door for a while, came in, holding hands. Daddy, Mommy, don't fight. The children's eyes were full of tears. Their little faces were drooping, and they looked hurt. Mommy, I'm sorry we didn't tell you about coming to see Daddy. After saying a few words, Momo sniffled, and then continued. It was our fault, and then continued. But we really miss Daddy. The kids at kindergarten all have daddies, and we're so jealous. Our birthday wish when we were 5 years old was for Mommy and Daddy to be together, so we could be a happy family, just like the other kids. I always dream about playing with Daddy, but when I wake up, it's all gone. It makes me so sad. Hearing this, Zhang Jingting was moved. It was his absence that had given the children an incomplete childhood. Lin Banksia, as a mother, knew that her children were acting, but she still felt a pang in her heart, and she wanted to cry. She bent down and instinctively hugged them. Don't cry, don't cry. Her eyes were full of tears. She couldn't bear to hear the children say these things. It made her feel even more guilty. Mommy, stay here tonight. And then shook Lynn Banksia's hand, his eyes pleading. Momo's eyes were full of tears. Mommy, we just met Daddy, and we don't want to leave him, but we also miss you. Lynn Banksia suddenly realized that even though they were so smart, with a higher IQ than adults, they were still only 6 years old. Zhang Jingding was sitting on the sofa. He looked down as he poured tea. He didn't say anything, and his aura was cold. Lynn Banksia felt the chill coming from the man. She looked at the courtyard through the glass windows. Her men were still being controlled. She was clearly no match for him. Let them go. Lin Banksia turned to look at Zhang Jingding and said coldly. Zhang Jingding put down his teacup and stood up. As he walked past her, his cold eyes swept over her. And then he left. It was a work day, and he had things to do. Lin Banksia didn't know what he meant. She looked at his back. She saw him tell his men something before he got into the car, and then they let go of her people. Mommy, Daddy is really nice. And Momo tried to bring them together. Don't be biased against him. People online say that many women dream of marrying him. The woman turned back and looked at the children. She patted their heads. You might be right about one thing. It's probably safest and most reasonable to leave you here. Today's news was all about the scandal of Yang Yiming being thrown out in the middle of the night. He was probably furious. It was the first time the two children had heard Mommy agree to stay. They were so happy that they started jumping up and down. Young mistress, Zhou Sa was overjoyed. I'll go prepare a room for you. Do you have any special requests? What style do you like? The name young mistress made Lin Banksia pause. She looked at the kind middle-aged woman and quickly said, Hello, I don't have any requests. Please don't call me young mistress. My name is Lin Banksia. Well, I can't just call you by your first name. I'll call you Miss Lin for now. Zhou Sa was extremely happy. Young Master Zhang didn't like women, but he had finally been linked with a woman, and they even had children. If she wasn't the young mistress now, she would definitely be in the future. Miss Lin, what would you like for lunch? Zhou Sa was happier than ever before. Then her phone rang. Sorry, I need to answer this call first. It wasn't you. Banksia, Uncle Ming is having convulsions and his lips are turning purple. Where are you? I'll be right back. After hanging up, she told Zhou Sa, Could you please take care of my children for me? Okay, don't worry. Young Master Zhang also said that they aren't allowed to leave. Before Lin Banksia left, she patted the children on the head. Be good. Listen to what you're told. Then she walked out. Mommy, what happened? Mommy, do you need our help? No. She ran off. She was already far away. Take care of yourselves. The two children didn't chase after her. They just called after her. We want to sleep with Mommy tonight. Remember to come back. Okay, she replied without turning around. Uncle Ming was important, but her children were important too. Especially now that her children were longing for their daddy, she couldn't let him take advantage of the situation. Emotionally, she needed to draw the children closer to her. Today's news had caused a lot of problems for Yang Yiming. The media was everywhere, and they were just waiting for him to show his face. He had decided not to go to the office. He was at home and feeling helpless. Last night, he had been thrown out in the middle of the night and had had to stay in a small apartment that he had bought a while ago. It was a rundown place from 20 years ago. All of his money had gone into the company. He had thought that he could live in the Lin family villa forever, so he had never bought another property. Even though Xie Yueru had slept there, she still hated it. She didn't feel at home, and she couldn't accept the fact that they were living there. How could people live here for a long time? It's like a place for rats, and there are cobwebs everywhere. She was angry and upset. Honey, you need to take out some money and resolve this housing problem for the three of us. I'm currently discussing a partnership with the Junshin Group. If we can make a deal, then we'll have the money to buy a bigger house. Yang Yiming told her. The woman was hopeful. His dreams were beautiful. He comforted her. Although it won't be as big as the Lin family villa, it'll definitely be better than this. Honey, Xie Yueru hugged him and snuggled into his arms. The most important thing right now is to hold on to our Lin Corporation. We can't let that brat take it from us. They couldn't let their guard down now that some of the company's seals were gone. Don't worry, I have control of the company. It won't be taken away so easily. I'll go to the office now. The deal with the Junshin Group needs to be put on the schedule. Because of the wedding chaos and the fact that Lin Bangxia had gotten into young Master Jean's car, he felt a strange sense of danger. If Lin Bangxia had a good relationship with young Master Jean, then there was a high chance that this business deal would fall through. Shortly after Yang Yiming left, Lin Yao came out of her bedroom, ready to go out. She had seen the news, and she was furious. The video of them being thrown out had been captured with perfect clarity. "Where are you going?" Xiaoyu was worried when she saw that her daughter had dressed up. "Didn't I tell you to stop working for now? You should just rest." The wedding had been ruined, and her emotions were probably unstable. Also, the Shu family had been asking for their betrothal gifts back. If her daughter went out and was seen by reporters, the public opinion would also get worse. "I'm going to find Lin Bangxia." Lin Yao was also very brave. She said as she was putting her shoes on. Xiaoyu was shocked. "What? Have you lost your mind? She is the one who managed to kidnap even Ming. She is not a soft touch like she used to be. What can she do? We live in a society governed by law." Lin Yao didn't care. "She can't just kill me. Besides, I've never done anything to her. I just want to meet her." After saying that, the girl ran out. She was very brave. Lin Bangxia received a call from Yu and immediately rushed back to the Su Lin mansion. "Uncle Ming." She rushed to Uncle Ming's room. While asking about the situation, she began examining him. The frail man on the bed was rolling his eyes, his body convulsing. A few of her subordinates were standing at the door, and the nurses in the room looked lost and confused. Yu reported anxiously. He hadn't taken his medicine, and then he suddenly started convulsing. "It's been almost half an hour now." Lin Bangxia sat down next to the bed and immediately took his pulse. Everyone was looking at her, their hopes resting on her. Uncle Ming's expression looked painful, as if he had been shocked by something. Bangxia's brow furrowed a bit. After a while, she released Uncle Ming's wrist and got up to leave. Yu quickly followed her. "Is it serious?" "It's okay. It's not life-threatening." Lin Bangxia began to prepare the medicine as she made a diagnosis. "I'll give him an injection first, to prevent the situation from getting worse. It's lucky I got back in time." From the medicine box that she had brought back from abroad, she took out some of the medicine that she had prepared herself. Over the years, Bangxia had not only studied Chinese medicine, but also Western medicine. She wanted to help humanity. After quickly preparing the medicine, she picked up the syringe and asked, "Is the herbal medicine being brewed?" "Anu?" "Yes, it'll be ready soon. Pour it out and let it cool. It will work better if he drinks it half an hour after the injection." "Okay." And Yu, as her best friend, was a good assistant. Over the years, the two had become inseparable. "How are the children?" she asked. "They found their daddy. They're safer with him than they would be here." "Okay." In the room, with the help of the nurses, Lin Bangxia injected Uncle Ming with the medicine. When she had washed her hands and came back to his bedside, his convulsions had subsided a little. Uncle Ming was rolling his eyes. Only the corners of his mouth were still twitching. His voice was also slurred. "Young miss, run away, run away." Every cell in his body seemed to be tense. His difficult pronunciation and sincere feelings touched Lin Bangxia deeply. She was shocked and saddened. 6 years, Uncle Ming was still trying to protect her. She sat down on the edge of the bed and held Uncle Ming's hand tightly. He was so thin, his bones were digging into her hand. "Uncle Ming, I'm here, and I'm fine." She remembered the scene from 6 years ago when he had tried to get her into the taxi while getting beaten. The others in the room were also touched. At the Junshin Group, a landmark building in Silver City, Zhang Jingting, who had returned to the company, finished the last of his work. He called home to check in. Young Master Zhang, Miss Lin received a call and left in a hurry. Zhou Sa reported truthfully. "What about the children?" The man was nervous. "The 2 young masters are still here. Don't worry, they are safe." Zhang Jingting let out a sigh of relief. Zhou Sa added, "I've prepared a room for Miss Lin. It's next to yours." "Okay." He didn't show any resistance. Zhou Sa was overjoyed. There was hope for those two. She had watched young Master Zhang grow up. She really wanted to see him start a family. After hanging up, Zhang Jingting couldn't help but worry about Lin Bangxia's situation. Had something happened? President. Then, Mu Bo came into the office with a document. Yang Yiming wants to work with us on the resort project. He sent people over 3 times to schedule a meeting. He's being very sincere. Just hearing Yang Yiming's name made Zhang Jingting feel disgusted. His expression was cold and dark, and he didn't say anything. Mu Bo stood next to him. He looked at the president's cold and handsome face and was confused. So, should he reject Yang Yiming? Remember this, no matter how sincere that man is, I will never work with him. Zhang Jingting took the document from his assistant. He looked like he owed him 800 million. Is it because of Miss Lin Bangxia? Of course Mu Bo wanted to know the reason, to avoid making any mistakes in the future. The man walked towards his office chair, his face cold and handsome. She's the mother of my children. Her enemies are also my enemies. Although there was no warmth in the president's words, Mu Bo could feel the strong affection. That was rare. He had never seen the president be this way about a woman. It was only a matter of time before Miss Lin became Mrs. Zhang. Understood. Mu Bo was happy for him. People needed to have an emotional connection, and that was something that was important. Then, Mu Bo's phone rang. He took it out and looked at the screen. It was Yang Yiming again. He glanced at the caller ID and then at the man at his desk. He picked up the phone in front of him. Hello, Mr. Yang. Mu Bo was still polite. Even though Yang Yiming was older than him, he still had a smile on his face in front of Mu Bo. He asked carefully, Hello, Assistant Mu. What is President Zhang's response? Were you able to ask him? Well, our president isn't considering working with you. Why not? The other party's hearts sank. He said anxiously, My project proposal should be good. Did you show it to him? Is there anything he didn't like? Could you let us revise it? Please give me a chance. He didn't look at it, Mu Bo said with a smile, cutting him off. He doesn't want to see it. He has rejected your offer to partner. Do you have any more questions? Yang Yiming was confused and unwilling to give up. Why not? In our president's world, there is no why. There's only what he wants and what he doesn't want. Hearing this, Yang Yiming's heart sank completely, and the line went dead. Holding the phone that had been hung up, he didn't give up. This was his last hope. He was counting on this money to get rich and buy a big house. Therefore, he decided to go to the Yu Bamboo Villas tomorrow morning and confront young Master Zhang directly with his project proposal. In the evening, Zhang Jingting was getting ready to leave work. His phone rang, and he answered. Did you find out? President, although we haven't found out who drugged you 7 years ago, we have found out who set Lin Bangxia up in that room. Young Master Zhang's eyebrows furrowed slightly. She was set up? Yes. If you hadn't gone into the wrong room and locked the door, the 3 drunks that were living under a bridge would have been the ones thrown in there. That news made Zhang Jingting's heart skip a beat. So, the rumors that Lin Bangxia's child was from a bum under a bridge? That was where that came from. The man's eyes narrowed. Was it her stepmother who arranged it? He didn't even realize that he was instinctively trying to protect that woman. Yes. Zhang Jingting's expression darkened. He felt complicated. Before, he had been wary of the woman, but now he just felt guilty. It was his fault that he had gone into the wrong room and forced himself on her. But if he hadn't slept with her, what would have happened to her? Zhang Jingting thought for a moment. He didn't feel so guilty anymore. He might have saved that girl's life. At the Su Lin mansion, Uncle Ming's condition had finally stabilized after the injection, and he had slowly fallen asleep. Lin Bangxia took his pulse again. Remembering her promise to the children, she got up and told Yu, I'm leaving this place to you for now. I won't be back tonight. Where will you be staying? And Yu was worried. The girl thought for a moment, and then decided to be honest with her. I'll be staying at Zhang Jingting's house. And Yu was shocked, but because they knew each other so well, she didn't say much. She just told her, don't worry about this place. You just focus on what you need to do. Even though Yang Yiming's people knew Lin Bangxia's hideout was there, they couldn't do anything to her. Because she had already laid out defenses, her subordinates were all very skilled. Uncle Ming wouldn't end up back with Yang Yiming. He didn't have any value anymore. They only wanted to prove whether Lin Bangxia was still alive. After leaving the Su Lin mansion, Bangxia decided to buy 2 sets of clothes for the children and 2 sets for herself. She drove to the mall. She had many sources of income and had long since achieved financial freedom, so she didn't even flinch when swiping her card. After buying the clothes and leaving the mall, she bumped into Lin Yao. She seemed to have been waiting for her there. Her eyes were fixed on Lin Banksia. Sister. Lin Yao stepped forward and spoke in a weak voice. Lin Banksia felt like she was going to throw up her lunch. She asked, "Who is your sister?" She rolled her eyes at her and began to walk away. "Sister, please wait." The girl anxiously stepped forward and grabbed her arm. Her voice wasn't loud, but was very firm. "Sister, can we sit down and talk?" Lin Banksia was pulled to a stop. She frowned at her. "What do you want? Why are you trying to get close to me? I've heard about what Mom and Dad have done." The girl's face was full of regret, righteousness, and pity. She was using all of her acting skills. "They're really awful." Lin Yao looked like a good person, with tears in her eyes. "I apologize to you on their behalf. I also understand your actions at the wedding, and I don't blame you at all, really. Is it easy to be the eldest daughter of the Lin family?" Lin Banxia's lips curled slightly. She said coldly. Lin Yao didn't know how to answer for a moment. "I'm afraid that even if I gave what's mine to you, you wouldn't be able to hold on to it." After that, Lin Banksia shook off her hand and began to walk away. "Sister, shut up." She stopped and turned around, glaring at her again. "My eyes are not a dye vat. I can't handle your changing colors. Like mother, like daughter. You're not much better than her. Don't try to get close to me." After saying that, Lin Banksia turned around and left. She wouldn't give her the chance to get close to her and find an opportunity to attack. Lin Yao stood there, her fists clenched, glaring at her back. Her originally weak and innocent eyes were now full of hatred. That woman wasn't falling for it. If she could just get her to have a cup of coffee, she could drug it. Lin Banksia had barely driven off when her phone rang. She answered it. "Hello, Anand. Where are you, Mommy?" The little boy's sweet voice came through the phone. "Are you going to keep your promise? Are you coming to be with us tonight?" "Yes." Lin Banksia started her car. "I'm already on my way. Mommy just bought you some new clothes. Daddy's already home, and he bought us new clothes too." Anand was very happy, and Moemo added from the side, "Mommy, did you and Daddy have a telepathic connection? You bought the same thing without even planning it." Zhang Jingning had just put the clothes down. His eyes flickered, but he didn't say anything, as if he hadn't heard. Lin Banksia was a little distracted. "I need to hang up. I'm driving." At the Yu Bamboo Villas, in the living room, Zhang Jingning sat down on the sofa. He held out his hands to the children. The two children ran over excitedly and sat on his lap, one on each side. "Daddy, are you going to sleep with Mommy tonight?" Those words made the man look up. He was speechless, and then explained, "Daddy, we want you and Mommy to sleep with us. The bed is so wide. There's enough room. A family should always be together." Cough. Zhang Jingding had overthought it. He raised an eyebrow. He always had the urge to think back to that night 7 years ago. He couldn't seem to have any other memories of her. "Daddy, please?" The children pulled his arm, bringing him back to reality. Zhang Jingding was visibly uncomfortable. "Of course I'll do whatever you want. You just need to be happy." Making up for his absent fatherhood, he wouldn't start by refusing their request. Yay! As long as Daddy was willing, they would figure out how to deal with Mommy. Soon, an unmarked Maybach was stopped at the entrance. It was allowed through after a moment and drove into the courtyard. The two children saw it through the glass windows. "Did Mommy buy a new car?" "That's the Maybach that I was looking at." The two children jumped off of Daddy and ran towards the entrance. Zhang Jingning looked outside. He thought, where did that woman get all this money? She also had to raise the children. Was it from the money that her genius sons had earned? In the information that he had gotten about her, the details about her income were missing. He didn't know how much assets she owned, but she didn't seem poor. "Mommy!" Soon, they came inside. "Mommy, the clothes you bought us are the same as the ones Daddy bought us." And I was very surprised. "It's the same store. Even the bags are the same. They're exactly the same look." And Momo pointed to the sofa. "The colors and style are the same." Lin Banksia paused. Her first thought was, how could their taste be the same? Secondly, he actually bought clothes for the children? Which woman did you get to pick them out? They have good taste. Lynn Banksia smiled, trying to ease the awkwardness. Only then did Jean Jinning look up at her. The woman was tall, her eyes were bright, and her eyebrows were delicate. She was beautiful and a little wild. Had she dressed up for this? So, I couldn't have picked them out myself? The man retorted. You're always so sarcastic. Oh, he was fighting back? Just then, Zhou Sa came in with a fruit platter, and she sensed that something was going on. Miss Lin, this just shows that you and young Master Jean have a telepathic connection. Lin Banksia unintentionally met Jean Jingting's gaze, and feeling a little embarrassed, she quickly looked away. She didn't want to have a telepathic connection with him. Then it was time for dinner. It was a feast. Butler Shin came over and told everyone that dinner was ready. The children held her hands, taking her to the dining room. Mommy, Daddy's house is so big. The dining room is bigger than our bedrooms. Mommy, the chefs here cook so well. Mommy, you have to try this salt and pepper shrimp. I specifically asked the chef to make it for you. The children were very enthusiastic, calling her mommy at every opportunity, even in front of Jean Jingting, which made her feel very embarrassed. At the dinner table, Jean Jingting said, I've enrolled in an MOMO in kindergarten. They'll start next Monday. Do you have any objections? I'll pay the tuition and handle the transportation. Lin Banksia looked up, but before she could say anything, the children said in unison, Thank you, Daddy. You must keep them safe. She said bluntly, If anything happens, I'll come to you. Those words were uncomfortable. The man said coldly, reminding her, Miss Lin, this is Silver City. So what about Silver City? The girl asked as she peeled a shrimp. Silver City, my territory. Jean Jingting looked up at her. His tone was light, and his eyes flashed with a hint of disdain. If anyone dares to touch them, I'll take their lives. Lin Banksia met the man's gaze, and she felt a warning. He meant that she shouldn't overestimate herself and challenge him for the children. The restaurant fell into a brief silence. When Daddy and Mommy's eyes met, the children's hearts cried out in alarm. Danger! So, Momo quickly began serving Lin Banksia some soup. Mommy, this is super delicious. You have to try it. Daddy, the shrimp is so good. I'll peel one for you. And then quickly got up and went over to Jean Jingting. With the children's interference, the situation eased. After dinner, the children, acting like it was their own home, grabbed Mommy's hands and took her around the villa, giving her a tour. It was as if their mommy was going to live there forever and was going to become the mistress of the house. She needed to get to know her surroundings. They took her to the outdoor swimming pool, the private cinema, the tea room, the study, the gym, and the children's room, and also the bedroom that Zhou Sa had prepared for her. They took her to every place. So, Mommy, isn't our daddy super rich? And Momo was full of pride. He lives in such a big house. And I heard he has several other properties. Yeah, she said softly, not sounding very impressed. Now that I've seen everything, can I leave with you now? What? The children looked at her, confused. Where are we going? Lin Banksia had her own rules, and when she thought of the children leaving without telling her, and now worshipping their daddy so much, she felt a little upset. She pulled them into the bedroom that Zhou Sa had prepared for her and locked the door. Mommy, Momo grabbed Inan's hand. He felt that something was wrong. Even the smart kids could sense it. Lin Banksia didn't say anything. She sat down in a chair. Her gaze on them was cold. The children held hands, looked at each other, and then walked toward her. And Momo, as the older brother, had always been responsible. He started to apologize. I'm sorry. Our actions of finding Daddy without telling you did hurt you. We didn't think about how you felt. She had raised her children, and now someone was trying to take them from her. As a mother, she was naturally terrified. Mommy, please don't be angry. We didn't tell you because we were afraid that you wouldn't let us look for Daddy. So, right now, who do you love the most? Lin Banksia asked. Of course it's Mommy. The children blurted out. Mommy gave birth to us. You lost so much blood, and you've suffered so much. Who else would we love? Well, that felt good. Anin, seeing that she was still silent, looked guilty. Please don't be angry, Mommy. In this world, is it bad to have more people loving us? She had been very angry, but seeing that they were safe and happy Lynn Banksia couldn't bring herself to blame them. But now, what should she do? She was old-fashioned, living in a time when holding hands meant they would spend their lives together. She had slept with a man and had his children. Subconsciously, she also wanted to give her children a complete family. But she hadn't expected it to be with Zhang Jingding. It was a little scary. She had heard that he didn't like women, was sensitive and suspicious, and that he didn't trust humanity or marriage. He was also very moody. "Mommy, we want to take a shower now." "Okay." The children took the initiative to kiss her on the cheek, and then turned around and left. They were very happy living here. Lynn Banksia could feel it. The bedroom was big. It was next to the master bedroom. The decorations were aesthetic and also very warm. There was a bouquet of beautiful lilies on the dressing table. Half an hour later, she decided to check on the children. As she opened the door, she bumped into Zhang Jingting. He was shirtless and was wrapped in a towel. "Ah!" Lynn Banksia screamed and turned around. She instinctively covered her eyes, and her forehead hit the door, making her head spin. "Are you crazy? Walking around without any clothes?" It hurt. It hurt so bad that she gasped. He had originally wanted to ask if she was okay, but she called him crazy. Zhang Jingting's face darkened. "This is my own house," he said, holding a glass of milk. He was speechless. Then Lynn Banksia heard him walk away. The pain on her forehead slowly subsided. When she came back to her senses and turned around, he was gone. She was so angry. But his body had looked good. His healthy skin, his six-pack abs, anyone who saw that would be nervous. She should have bumped into him. "Mommy!" Just then, the two little children came upstairs, dressed in their pajamas, and ran towards her. Lynn Banksia quickly took her hands away from her forehead. "Did you finish your shower?" The children grabbed her hands, their eyes shining. "Mommy, there's still one place in this big house that we haven't shown you. Let's go. We'll take you there now." "Where else is there?" she asked. She was forced to start walking with the children. "I don't need to know this place very well." She wasn't really thinking. No. This place is very important." The children pushed open a door and pulled her inside. A bedroom of the same size came into view. The furnishings were less warm and were more minimalist and luxurious. A double bed that was over 2 meters wide was the focal point of the room. The lights were warm and soft. Lynn Banksia felt her throat tighten. "This is your daddy's bedroom?" "Yep." The children replied proudly, thinking, "You'll be sleeping here in the future, so you need to know what it's like." She turned around to leave, but the children pulled her back and then yelled at her. "This bed is so comfortable. Try it." Emoemo asked directly, "Mommy, are you going to sleep with us tonight?" Lynn Banksia was shocked by her son's outlandish request. "We want to sleep with Daddy, and we want to sleep with Mommy." Just then, the bathroom door opened. Zhang Jingting, now in his pajamas, appeared. His tall figure, his handsome face, and his distinguished air made Lynn Banksia's heart flutter. He had heard everything the children had said. Lynn Banksia felt a little embarrassed and didn't dare to look at him. She was about to turn around and leave, when Inan jumped out of bed and grabbed her hand again. He said, looking pitiful, "Mommy, kids at kindergarten all sleep with their mommies and daddies. I'm so jealous. We've never done that once." Emoemo lowered his head and said sadly, "Yeah, we've never done that once." Then he coughed a few times. It didn't sound fake. He had a real cough, and he looked a little fragile and pitiful. As a doctor, Lynn Banksia instinctively squatted down and took her son's shoulders. "Emoemo, are you sick?" Seeing that his mommy was nervous, the child was very happy. Zhang Jingding also came over. Banksia reached out and felt his forehead. He was a little feverish. She frowned slightly. He was fine this afternoon. He had been fine during dinner. Zhang Jingding was very skilled in the business world, but he had no experience with his child being sick. As a father, he felt a little anxious. Should we call a doctor or go to the hospital? What do you usually do? Do you have any fever patches at home? Lynn Banksia's focus was now on her son, and she didn't feel so embarrassed anymore. "Yes," he responded and then walked away. After a while, they heard a door close. Lynn Banksia hugged her son. She finally relaxed a little. She felt very pressured when she was in the same space as him. "Mommy, stay here," and then looked up at her, his eyes blinking. He pleaded, "Sleep here tonight." Lynn Banksia looked at the children's hopeful eyes, the words of refusal catching in her throat. They only wanted their mommy and daddy to sleep with them for one night. That was all. Soon, the bedroom door opened, and Zhang Jingding walked in quickly, carrying a fever patch and a glass of warm water. "Let me hold the child," he said, placing the water glass down and gently taking Mo from her arms. "You can apply the patch. You have experience with that." He sat on the edge of the bed. Lynn Banksia peeled the patch and expertly placed it on the child's forehead. "I usually avoid giving them medicine unless it's necessary. Their bodies have their own immune system." He replied, agreeing with her decision. Mo, sitting on his father's lap, reached out to grasp his mother's arm. "Can you both sleep with me tonight?" "Please." His voice was weak, his request terribly pitiful. The pull made her lean closer, and for a moment she was lost in his dark, intense eyes. She quickly looked away, her heart skipping a beat. Mo looked up at his dad, then at his mom. "I'm sick. Can't you just agree with me this time? And it can sleep between us, and mommy and daddy can sleep on the sides?" And then interrupted. "Just think of it as fulfilling our little wish." For some reason, Lynn Banksia couldn't look at him anymore. Perhaps it was the powerful aura that seemed to surround him. She tried to pull her arm away, but Mo's grip was too strong, as though he wouldn't let her go until she agreed. Under the soft, warm glow of the lights, Zhang Jingting saw her up close for the first time. Her natural face, untouched by surgery, her skin as smooth as a baby's. She was pure, beautiful, and he was drawn to her. "Daddy, I'm sleepy." Mo whined, "Mommy." Lynn Banksia glanced at Zhang Jingting holding the child, her eyes meeting his deep, affectionate gaze. Her chest gave a little squeeze. How was she to bring up how they should sleep? She was just a woman. She couldn't possibly be the one to say anything, could she? "Mommy, come help us." And then, already on the bed, started to make the bed. He knew that actions speak louder than words. Beds were a private space. She looked up to see what her son wanted. "Go help them." Zhang Jingding spoke softly. Then to Mo, let go of mommy's hand. Mo was ecstatic. Did his dad just give the okay? He quickly let go. "Mommy, come on," and then pulled her towards the bed. Daddy's blanket is so big and heavy. The brothers had clearly been planning this out. Lynn Banksia took a deep breath and stepped forward to help spread out the comforter. The man stood, holding Mo, and as Banksia helped him remove his slippers, he laid the child down in the covers, and then grabbed Lynn Banksia's hand. "Mommy, stay with us, please," as if fearing she would leave. "Mommy." Mo, feverish, looked at her with pleading eyes. "Stay with me." Lynn Banksia felt a pang of guilt for her children. "Don't just stand there. Get in bed." And then pulled her to the edge of the bed and grabbed Zhang Jingting's hand. "Daddy, you get in bed too. Tell us a story. Other kids' dads tell them bedtime stories." "Yeah, in my class, Jean and Dodo's dad is a great storyteller. He tells them bedtime stories every night." Mo added, envious. Hearing that, Lynn Banksia felt a stab of sadness. She always wanted to give her children the best, but she had failed them at the most basic level. And then pulled her down to the edge of the bed, then turned out the lights before climbing into bed next to his brother. "This is so cool. We are going to hear Dad tell a story." Zhang Jingting, as the master of the house in this bedroom, said casually, "The bed is big enough. Let's sleep together." To be honest, I have no experience with telling bedtime stories. You tell it tonight, I'll learn. "Does that mean Daddy will tell us tomorrow night?" the children asked, their faces full of anticipation. "Sure." Zhang Jingting lifted the covers and lay down next to an. Lynn Banksia, still sitting on the bed, realized that if she didn't lie down, things would be more awkward. She reminded herself of why she was here, why she wanted a complete family for her kids. So, she lay down in the bed, turned on her side to hold Mo, and reached out for Ann's hand. By the moonlight streaming through the window, Lynn Banksia could see the man's profile clearly. His features were so sharp, so perfect. "Mommy, you tell the story tonight, then Daddy can tell it tomorrow night. And you can take turns, right?" Which meant her children wanted them to sleep together every night. "I'll tell one tonight. I might not be here tomorrow night." Lynn Banksia suddenly felt suffocated. She tried to adjust herself. Once, when a peacock first saw a sparrow, it laughed out loud. "Are you even a bird?" the peacock asked. It was so condescending because the sparrow was so dull-looking compared to its own magnificence and beauty. Night deepened. Zhang Jingting listened intently, the soft, maternal glow in her voice pulling him in. It made his heart warm, and he listened captivated. The night felt incredibly peaceful. He closed his eyes, remembering warm summer nights from his childhood, listening to his mother tell stories. The same night, the same city. In a rundown, old apartment where Yang Yiming and his family were staying, $1,000 had been spent to hire a cleaning crew to do a deep clean. His wife, Xiaoyu Eru, who was wearing a fur coat even though it was summer, complained nonstop. "When are we going to get this deal with Junshin Group? When will the money come? Should we go look at new houses this weekend?" Yang Yiming, just getting home, took off his coat, exhausted. "I don't know, I'll go talk to him tomorrow morning." "Didn't you talk to him today? Why is it tomorrow morning again?" President Zhang was busy today. He gave an excuse for the other man. He is a busy man, his schedule is set way in advance. It's not like he's going to see us when we want him to. To even meet him, we probably have to wait until next year. What are we going to do? His wife was anxious. This project is the only thing that will get us money fast. Do we have to stay in this dump for another year? Tomorrow morning, I plan to wait for him at his house. If I show him my sincere attitude, I'll definitely explain the benefits of the project within 10 minutes. Yang Yiming was confident. His words ignited hope in his wife's heart, and she smiled, throwing herself into his arms. "My hard-working husband." "Where's Yi Yao?" Yang Yiming asked her as he hugged her back. He had a soft, fatherly look on his face as he thought of his daughter. "Is she okay?" "She is in her room, in a bad mood." "What do you expect?" "I'll go see her." He went inside. He truly loved his daughter. The news surrounding Lin's group was still quite hot. In Silver City, apart from the four powerful families, the Lin's group was still quite rich. Even though it was now under the leadership of Yang Yiming, Lin's group was doing quite well. And as the four families hadn't been in the news lately, the media had shifted their attention to the Lin's group. The eldest daughter of Lin's group had just had her wedding ruined in a scandal. Yang Yiming and his family being chased out of the Lin villa in the middle of the night was still on the headlines. As a new actress, Lin Yao, who had become popular from a couple of hit shows, could only stay at home to hide from the controversy. Night was deep in the master bedroom of the Yu Bamboo Villas. As the story came to an end, Lin Banksia's voice grew softer and softer until she, too, fell asleep. Zhang Jingting, who was lying down, listened intently, his eyes open and gazing at the dark ceiling, his mind captivated, his ears still ringing with her soft voice. This night felt incredibly peaceful. He closed his eyes, remembering the warm summer nights from his childhood, listening to his mother tell stories. The moonlight outside was like water, and a gentle night breeze drifted through the window. He caught the faint scent of Chinese herbs emanating from the girl. He couldn't help but think of that night 7 years ago, and Zhang Jingding felt a complex mix of emotions. This woman had run off with his children and kept it a secret for so long. If the children hadn't come to him, he might never have known. He had every right to be angry, but when he thought of all she'd been through, he felt a strange pang of sympathy. Zhang Jingting, Banksia called his name softly, as if she knew he was still awake. He came back to himself, turning his head slightly. The moonlight streamed in through the window, making it difficult to see her face. The night was so silent. Her soft voice seemed to have been a hallucination, until she spoke again. "Let's get married?" The man paused, visibly startled. Then he asked coldly, "What makes you think I would marry you?" She didn't reply. Zhang Jingding told her, "Plenty of women would love to marry me. You just happen to have 2 kids. What makes you think you're special?" "Isn't having 2 kids enough?" she countered. "Aren't you fond of them?" She had a 90% feeling he would agree. "Don't think you can manipulate me," he said, his tone frosty. "You could have 10 kids, it wouldn't change anything. You're so sure of yourself, as if I asked you to marry me for your sake." Lin Banksia asked back, her tone nonchalant. "I just want my children to have a complete family, so they wouldn't have to feel envious of other kids. Not for his sake. Did she not have even the slightest feeling for him? Zhang Jingding felt that his pride had been hurt. He didn't want to deal with her. I want to sleep. Be quiet. He pulled the covers up. Lin Bangxia wasn't offended. From what she knew of him, he would seriously consider the proposal. She went silent. The two little ones were already fast asleep, and the room fell into silence. Zhang Jingting had investigated that night 7 years ago, and he knew she had not tricked him. But in this society, women's schemes were endless, and genuine feelings were hard to find. He was always on guard. He couldn't be manipulated. He needed to have control in every situation. Plenty of women would line up to be in his bed. And this girl, today, she had even called the police. Was she trying to show him that she was different? The next morning, when Zhang Jingting opened his eyes, he found that only the two little ones were still lying next to him. They rubbed their eyes and slowly woke. The woman was gone, as if everything that had happened last night had been a dream. Hey, where is Mommy? M.O. And then sat up and looked to the man. Daddy, you didn't send Mommy away last night, right? No. Zhang Jingting sat up. Okay, let's go find her, and then quickly pulled back the covers and got his shoes on. M.O. Is your fever any better? As a father, he asked, holding the child's hand. It didn't feel warm anymore. Lin Yimo tore off the fever patch and smiled. I am fine, Daddy, I'm better. Soon, the father and his sons walked down the stairs. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he saw the unplated Maybach. She was still there. And he could smell the aromas coming from the kitchen. It's sesame sauce noodles. M.O. screamed excitedly. Daddy, my mommy makes the best noodles. Let's go. Let's have breakfast. The two little ones took his hands and dragged him down the stairs. In the kitchen, Lin Bangxia had her hair half tied back. She was wearing an apron and looked sweet and capable. She had already cooked 4 bowls of noodles and was now making the ham and egg pancakes the children loved. Good morning, Mommy. The woman turned around when she heard them. M.O. Are you feeling better? Let me see. The little one let go of his dad's hand and ran to her. He was clearly feeling much better than he had been the night before. I am fine. I'm all better. Lin Bangxia was relieved. She patted the kids' heads. Go wash your face. You can eat the noodles soon. When she looked up, her eyes met Zhang Jingting's deep gaze. They were separated by just a few feet. The children had turned around. Daddy, let's go. We can taste Mommy's cooking soon. They pulled their dad to the bathroom, praising her along the way. My mommy makes the best noodles. You have to try them. As he followed the children, Lin Bangxia watched his retreating back. He was handsome and elegant, but somehow he gave off a cold and unapproachable aura. At breakfast, everyone sat around the table. The sesame sauce noodles were Lin Bangxia's specialty. They looked so delicious, and the aroma filled the air. Zhang Jingting did not look at her. He was wearing a tailored black suit that showcased his perfect figure. He ate his noodles elegantly, without making a sound. He had excellent manners. He chewed slowly, and was shocked by a flavor he had never had before. How is it? Daddy, is it good? And then asked, tilting his head expectantly. He had no other choice but to reply. Zhang Jingting looked up. The children were looking at him, waiting for his answer. When he looked over to the woman, Lin Bangxia's face was calm and serene. What wonderful food hasn't your dad eaten before? What's so special about noodles? She smiled slightly and then looked away. But thank you for not turning your nose up at it and for being here with the kids so that they wouldn't be disappointed. She thought he would be a good father. She had taken away everything he wanted to say. What else could he do but stay silent? The kids were so happy. The time they had together as a family, this ordinary, simple time, was the most wonderful thing. After breakfast, Lin Bangxia prepared to leave. M.O. And then, to make it fair, you stay here for 1 week, then come stay with Mommy for 1 week, okay? Mommy, can't you just stay here with us? M.O. was anxious, his little brows furrowed. You're not divorced. You haven't even tried. How do you know that you don't get along? And then added, yeah, Daddy is single and Mommy is single. Why can't you try to date? Are you both going to spend the rest of your lives alone? The children were straightforward. They were no longer hiding their feelings. All right, I'll think about it. Lin Bangxia responded, glancing at Zhang Jingting. She wanted to see his reaction. He even started to wonder if her children appearing out of nowhere was all part of the act. You better think carefully. Zhang Jingting's voice was low. Even though he felt a slight attraction to her, he did not want to lose control to a woman. If they were to get married, it had to be his idea. A few minutes later, in the yard, Lin Bangxia got into her Maybach, started the car, and slowly drove to the front of the gate. Yang Yiming, who had been waiting outside since early in the morning, instinctively reached out to stop the car. He was finally going to see President Zhang. Lin Bangxia stepped on the brake, rolled down the window, and looked out. A very polite and smiling Yang Yiming, who was standing next to the driver's seat, was shocked when he saw her face. Press, he started, but stopped himself, his face filled with confusion. Bangxia? Lin Bangxia was a little surprised. She had been having Yang Yiming's social circle investigated lately, and there was no sign that he and Zhang Jingting had any dealings. But seeing his fawning attitude, it didn't seem like they were in contact. It was more like he was being delusional, groveling, and trying to get on his good side. Lin Bangxia's lips curled into a smirk, her gaze fixed on him, showing both mockery and disdain. A few seconds later, she lightly pressed the gas pedal, and the car moved forward. Not saying anything to him, not giving him a single word, made Yang Yiming's blood run cold. He stood there, shocked, his eyes wide, and thought back to what she had said that day of the wedding scandal. Then I'll see you in court. 6 years. That's more than enough time for me to collect evidence. At that moment, a Lamborghini drove out of the yard. Zhang Jingting, sitting in the back seat, was looking at his tablet, oblivious to the person outside. It wasn't until the Lamborghini had also driven away that Yang Yiming came to his senses. He no longer had the courage to chase after them. His mind was racing. What was the relationship between Lin Bangxia and President Zhang? Why was she leaving his house so early in the morning? Were they living together? Were they secretly married? He imagined 1,000 possibilities, but he hadn't imagined that they already had a 6-year-old child. About 5 minutes later, at a certain intersection, a car suddenly darted out, dangerously cutting in front of Lin Bangxia's car. Screech! She slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched, and she came to a stop just inches before the crash. What the hell is wrong with you? Lin Bangxia's body lurched forward. She was furious. The driver's door opened, and Xu Qingyan got out, holding a bouquet of roses. He quickly approached her. Bangxia, good morning. The girl's expression became one of exasperation. Are you trying to get yourself killed? Bangxia, what have you decided about us? The man grinned, oozing confidence. He had even used extra hair gel today. Would you agree to go out with me? At that moment, the Lamborghini also appeared. The driver saw Lin's car from afar. He stepped on the brakes, turning to ask, President Zhang, it seems Miss Lin is having a bit of a problem. Would you like to check it out? Zhang Jingting, who was still looking at his tablet, glanced up at the window and saw a man holding flowers. He seemed familiar. No need, let's go, he replied, his expression unchanged. He continued looking for popular children's stories on the tablet. Lin Bangxia had no intention of getting out of the car to deal with Xu Qingyan. She rejected him firmly once again. Mr. Xu, adults should be efficient with their communication. Repeating yourself only wastes everyone's time and makes things awkward. I'm pursuing my happiness, not making things awkward. The man smiled, seemingly oblivious. I don't think it's awkward. I like you. I am not married, and you are not married. Everyone has the right to pursue their own happiness. I'm not your happiness. As she pressed on the gas, she turned the steering wheel to the right. The car drove off. At Bamboo Villas. After breakfast, the two children were sitting in wicker chairs in the yard, enjoying the sun. And inside, and Momo also sighed. They were very troubled. Looking at mommy and daddy's relationship, my candy-coated fruit doesn't taste that good. And instead, taking a bite of the candy, like he was chewing cardboard. Momo, wearing sunglasses, was looking up at the clouds. Do you think mommy will come back tonight? I think mommy saw what we were trying to do last night. She's a doctor after all. That's why the fever only lasted for a short while. She was sleeping next to you. So, do you think she will come back tonight? I don't know. Well, it doesn't matter. When we start school, Daddy will arrange for someone to pick us up. When Mommy misses us, she will come to see us. Talking about school, the two children's faces were full of excitement for the future. Even though they were very clever, they were still children. And children loved being around other children. Yang Yiming didn't go to find Zhang Jingting again. When he got back to his office, he was so angry, he threw the project plan on his desk. The project was a bust. It must have been because Lin Banxia said something to President Zhang that made him refuse to work with him. Then I'll see you in court. 6 years. That's more than enough time for me to collect evidence. The words kept repeating in his head. He thought back to Lin Banxia's smirk, and he suddenly felt scared. Xie Yueru, who was used to wearing fur coats in the summer, got ready and went out with her best friend around 10 a.m. I knew you had great taste, and you bought so many houses. You have to give me some advice, she said, holding her friend's arm and complimenting her. Her friend was also a wealthy woman. Her clothes and jewelry worth more than $10,000. Although she didn't wear fur coats, she had 7 golden bracelets on her arm. Yueru, I saw the news. Are you really not going back to the Lin estate? Did Yiming's daughter sell it? What daughter? We have nothing to do with her. Xie Yueru rolled her eyes. In the future, she will not inherit a single penny from the money that Yiming makes. Of course, she is just ungrateful. Her friend walked her into the Platinum Mansion sales office. Yueru, what type of house are you planning to buy? A large apartment or a mansion? What's the price range? This place is not cheap. At least $1 million. The woman pulled her fur coat tighter around her shoulders. This surprised her friend. She complimented her. It seems Lin's group is very rich. Of course. When they heard that the price was over $1 million, the sales staff was even more enthusiastic. They were serving tea and water. Their service was top-notch. Madam, what type of house would you like to see? A large mansion, above $1 million in a good location with great facilities. If it's really nice, $3 to $4 million isn't a problem. Xie Yueru posed as a rich woman, full of confidence. The salesperson gave them an enthusiastic tour. She was also serious about buying a house. She listened to her friend's advice and her own judgment. Finally, she picked one. I want this one by the river. We can pay the deposit, and I will be back in a few days to pay the full amount. Madam, you have excellent taste. This house was booked for 4 different customers today. They were all very interested, the salesperson said, but it depends on who pays first. The other 3 have to think about it a bit more. What about you? I will pay. I can pay a deposit. Xie Yueru had sold some of her jewelry and cobbled together some money. She was used to large houses and could not stand living in the old apartment. Because our houses are very popular, if you do not pay the deposit within the designated time, we will not refund it. The salesperson smiled and explained the rules. At that moment, Lin Banxia and Inyu walked into the sales office. She was there with Inyu, who was looking to buy a house. What deposit? The woman pulled at her fur coat and said loudly. Do you think I can't pay the full amount? Let me tell you, my company has a deal with Junxing Group, so we have plenty of money. That familiar voice made Lin Banxia turn around. As expected, she saw Xie Yueru wearing a fur coat in the summer.